I'd like to hear what the airlines are doing to uphold their commitments to the passengers and ensure that the paying customers are treated in a fair and respectful manner. It is this committee's responsibility to make sure that airlines follow through on these commitments, and we will continue our oversight efforts to ensure that positive changes made as a result to recent customer service debacles are not just a temporary response to the media spotlight. I want to thank the witnesses for attending today and look forward to hearing the testimony. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'd now like to recognize Subcommittee Ranking Member Larson for an opening statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Schuster, for holding today's hearing. I don't want to belabor all the points, just a few of them, so I will be brief. But I do want to note, Mr. Munoz, I want to make clear to you and all the other airlines at the table and those who are not here, what happened on United Express 3411 cannot happen again. We're here to discuss what went wrong and how such a scenario can be prevented from happening again. The incident that took place on April 9th was a result of United Airlines policy failures your company took steps to recognize last week. But in truth, these problems generally are not specific to United. Several of the airlines represented here today have recognized room for improvements in their own bookings, overbooking, and other policies, and have announced changes in the recent weeks. I'm hopeful these changes result in an enhanced focus on the paying customer going forward and better training and empowerment of frontline employees who must apply the changes in their interactions with passengers. In that same spirit, this morning, Ranking Member DeFazio and I requested that the GAO dive deeper into consumer protections for airline passengers. Understanding current protections and then identifying any gaps will be critical as we develop meaningful improvements in consumer protections for the flying public. Earlier this year, Ranking Member DeFazio and I introduced legislation to address two surefire ways that ruin someone's flight: unexpected fees and lengthy delays. The Know Before You Fly Act would ensure that airlines remain transparent when it comes to baggage fees and would require airlines to inform passengers at the time of ticket purchase what they will and will not do for passengers in the event of a widespread computer network failure. I would also like to note that consumer protection means that we must recognize the importance of improving air travel for persons with disabilities. I was pleased that last year's short-term Federal Aviation Administration extension bill included my provision requiring the DOT to move forward with a long-delayed rulemaking updating standards for airplane lavatory access for passengers with disabilities. We all must continue to advocate for the rights and protections like these for all travelers. So to you, they may be your customers. To us, they are constituents, deserving of the oversight and questions that we will ask today. So with that, I look forward to today's panel and to the forthcoming GAO report, and to yield the remainder of my time so we can proceed with this hearing, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. Again, I'd like to welcome again our panel of witnesses. Mr. Oscar Munoz, who's the Chief Executive Officer of United Airlines. He's accompanied by Mr. Scott Kirby, the President of United Airlines. Mr. Joseph Sprague, who's a Senior Vice President for External Relations for Alaska Airlines. Mr. Bob Jordan, Executive Vice President, Chief Commercial Officer for Southwest Airlines. Ms. Carrie Filipovich, Senior Vice President of Customer Experience for American Airlines. And Mr. William J. McGee, Aviation Consultant, Consumers Union. I look forward to hearing your testimony and to working with you in the coming months. And I ask unanimous consent that all our witnesses' full statements be included into the record. Without objection, so ordered. Since your written testimony has been made a part of the record, the committee would request you limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. And with that, Mr. Munoz, you may proceed. Microphone.
Thank you, Chairman Schuster and Ranking Member DeFazio.
And you might want to pull it a little closer to you.
Thank you, sir. Better?
Yeah, sir.
Thank you. And Ranking Member DeFazio, thank you as well as all members of the committee. We thank you for the opportunity to address the committee on this as equally important matter to us. As you said, my name is Oscar Munoz. I am the CEO of United Airlines, and with me is our President, Scott Kirby. The reason I'm sitting here today...
Could you pull that mic a little bit closer to you? Will it move? The whole thing should move. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks. The reason I'm sitting here today is because on April 9th, we had a serious breach of public trust. I'd like to again apologize to Dr. Dow, to his family, to every person on that flight 3411, and of course to all our customers and employees worldwide. Further, I'm personally sorry for the fact that my immediate response and the response of our airline was inadequate to that moment. No customer, no individual should ever be treated the way Mr. Dow was, ever, and we understand that. For the last 3 weeks, I have spent literally every single day thinking about how we got to this point. What chain of events culminates in the injury of a customer and the loss of trust and so many more. And so last week, on April 27th, we delivered on our promise to release an analysis of sorts about what happened, where we fell short, and the actions we need to take to change the customer experience at United, as all of you have so wonderfully articulated. From our perspective, there were many failures, but there were 4 main failures that we outlined in this report. First, we called on law enforcement when safety or security did not exist. That should never happen, period. Second, we rebooked crew at the very last minute. We created a situation at our own doing that we should have never done. And third, we didn't offer enough compensation or enough incentivize or any options for those customers to give up a seat. And therefore, and perhaps the largest failure, our employees did not have the authority to do what was right or to use, frankly, their common sense, as some of you outlined. And in that moment, for our customers and our company, we failed. And so, as CEO, at the end of the day, that is on me. And this has to be a turning point for the 87,000 people and professionals here at United. And it is my mission to make sure that we make the changes needed to provide our customers with the highest levels of service, of course, that you come to respect, reliability, but also, as some of you mentioned, a deeper sense of respect and trust and dignity. Our report announced several immediate and some long-term changes that we will, at first, completely prevent an issue like this from ever happening again. And second, improve the overall United experience, not just today, but into the future. For example, unless safety or security are an issue, we will never again ask a customer to give up their seat once they're on board. Simple common sense. Or ask law enforcement to remove a customer from a flight. Second, we've already taken a reevaluation of our overbooking policies, although that wasn't a factor necessarily in this case. It is something that we chose to reevaluate. And so we have reduced it. And if faced with an overbooked situation, which will indeed occur in certain instances for many, many factors, we will identify volunteers earlier when we can, and more importantly, offer incentives up to $10,000, because again, common sense says that you can't stop at a number. If no one's moving to their seat, you have to give them something more, and even more importantly, offer them options for travel on top of that. And that's the combination of things that we do. And of course, we're not going to move our own crew, our own folks around unless schedule those 60 minutes before departure so we don't have the same situation that happened. And then, as an additional policy review that really had nothing to do with a particular incident, we've eliminated the red tape around permanently lost bags by instituting a no-question-asked $1,500 reimbursement for permanently lost luggage. And later this year, we will roll out a new app on our apps, on our phones, that will give frontline employees the ability to compensate customers proactively when service disruptions occur. If we break it, it's incumbent upon us to fix it. And that's the intent of the work that we're doing. So these changes are just a start. We understand that. I also know we need to do a better job of solving problems in the moment and making travel smoother and easier for our customers when challenges arise. And challenges often arise, some beyond our control, some well within our control. But it's incumbent upon us to solve those as best as possible. When I became CEO 18 months ago, I promised we would make United the best airline, not only for our customers to fly, but for our employees to work with. I said it because I believe in this company, a company that's been in business since the earliest days of aviation. That's almost a century of flying. In fact, at this very moment, there are 600 to 700 United planes in the air, carrying hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. And before the day is done, we will take off and land almost 4,500 times. And by the end of this year, we will carry 86 million people to 53 countries around the globe. It has become routine to be in Washington today and in China tomorrow. Our United team, along with many of us in the industry, have truly made that extraordinary feat of moving around the world. We've made it ordinary and routine. And we had a horrible failure 3 weeks ago. It is not who we are. It is not this company. And frankly, it's not this industry. We have many, many successes, and it's important to note the two. But we are here to discuss certain issues that won't happen again. So we will work incredibly hard to re-earn not your business necessarily, but your trust, because that's the most important thing that we have with our customers all around the world. And more importantly, as we've proven over the course of the last week, our actions will speak definitely longer than our words. We will do better. And so I thank you, and Scott and I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz. Mr. Sprague.
Good morning, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, Chairman Lobiondo, Ranking Member Larson, and members of the committee. My name is Joe Sprague, and I am Senior Vice President of External Relations for Alaska Airlines. Alaska Airlines is the 5th largest U.S. airline. We have a workforce of 19,000 employees, 280 aircraft, and 1,200 daily departures. While we have grown considerably over the last 10 years, we are still small by airline standards. The 4 largest airlines represent 85% of the U.S. domestic capacity, while Alaska is just 7%. We fill a niche role in the industry. While we are an 85-year-old company, we have a low-cost, low-fare business model, yet offer a premium service product to our guests. We know this hearing is driven by a desire to explore U.S. airline customer service policies in light of certain recent incidents. This has been a tough few weeks for the airline industry, and the team at Alaska acknowledges our colleagues at United and other airlines for their policy changes and other efforts to quickly respond to these situations. For our part, Alaska is actively reviewing sensitive customer policies such as overbooking, and it is our intention to further improve the experience for our guests. Alaska's relative small size requires us to have a laser-like focus on customer service as we compete every day for each of our guests. Our stated purpose is creating an airline people love, which we view as an ongoing process of improvement. We are continuously implementing service enhancements to improve our guests' in-flight experience, including the recent launching of premium class, the enhancing of in-flight entertainment and connectivity options, and upgrading our food and beverage service. However, it is the caring service our people deliver that is key to us winning guests, along with any accolades we may receive. And our formal company value of being kind-hearted serves as an important guide. We have been humbled to receive recognition for our customer service, including receiving the J.D. Power Award for highest in customer satisfaction for 9 years in a row, as well as just recently earning the #1 ranking in the annual airline quality rating. While we are proud of these accomplishments, we know the strong competition we face every day from our fellow U.S. airlines requires us to constantly up our game. The airline business is not only highly competitive, but also extremely complex. This means comprehensive policies and procedures are necessary. At Alaska Airlines, we also have a focus on empowering our employees to use their judgment to make exceptions to policies and procedures to ensure our guests have the most positive experience possible. Our smaller size gives us the ability to be somewhat nimble in this area. All of Alaska's customer-facing employees, over 8,500 of them, have attended a day-and-a-half-long training session called Beyond Service, which is specifically designed to give them the tools they need to execute on our high service standards. This training is refreshed annually and incorporated into new hire training courses. In addition, all our customer-facing employees are given what we call an empowerment toolkit, enabling them to provide additional compensation, including miles or discounts, on the spot to resolve customer service issues. Our airport customer service agents have recently been outfitted with mobile devices to better assist customers, and our empowerment toolkit is a key app on these devices. One area where sound policies and good judgment is certainly needed is in the denied boarding environment. At Alaska Airlines, denied boarding events are very rare. In 2016, only 0.4 guests per 10,000 boarded were faced with an involuntary denied boarding, a rate of just 0.004%. While this positions us as one of the better performers in this area, we believe even this is too high. We are actively looking at our policies to see what we can do to bring this number down further. For example, in a denied boarding situation, we are updating our policies to make it explicit that our customer service agents are empowered to do the right thing for our guests, including having discretion over compensation, with the overriding goal to provide the incentives needed so as not to adversely impact our guests. At Alaska Airlines, we view the airline business as fundamentally a people business. If we have angry customers, no one wins. This is not to say that mistakes and anomalies do not sometimes arise, and every airline is vulnerable to that, including us. But it has been our experience that such mistakes become lessons that carriers use to improve and, where necessary, implement changes to policies and procedures affecting customers. I believe this is on display with the airlines represented here today. Thank you for the opportunity to present Alaska Airlines' views, and I would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sprague. And Mr. Jordan, you may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Schuster, Congressman DeFazio, and the other members of the committee. My name is Bob Jordan. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Southwest Airlines, and I've been there nearly 30 years. A lot of that time I've had the chance to work on the customer experience, so hopefully I can be helpful today. You all know the history of Southwest Airlines. We started in 1971 serving the Texas Triangle, Dallas, Houston, and Austin, and we've grown to be the largest domestic carrier here in the U.S. today, serving over 120 million customers a year. We have about 54,000 Southwest Warriors. We have an unblemished history with our employees, which is a 46-year record of no furloughs, no layoffs. And I think what I'm actually most proud of is that we have for 43 years provided profit sharing for our employees, which includes a $586 million profit sharing payment to our employees here in this past year. One of the basic principles of Southwest Airlines comes from our founder, Herb, who many of you know, and it's pretty simple. It's if you treat your employees right, they will in turn treat your customers right. It's also important to know that while this hearing is about customer service, our employees, particularly at the airports, have very tough jobs. And it's critical not just, they're critical not just to providing customer service, but to providing a safe and reliable operation every single day. And our another key principle at Southwest is our purpose statement, which is pretty basic as well. It's to connect people to what is important in their lives through friendly, reliable, and low-cost air travel. And we've invested in that a lot in the last couple of years, and I think made improvements. And one of those big investments is a very intense program around hospitality and training our employees on hospitality and generally just how to be more civil with each other and how to be more civil with our customers. But at the same time, I appreciate the fact that our company is not perfect and we make mistakes. There's always room for improvement. And as Herb likes to say, and a lot of you know Herb, please never rest on your laurels, because if you do, you will simply get a thorn up your ass. So with that in mind, and with the need to constantly make improvements, we've announced that beginning May 8th, Southwest will no longer overbook flights. That decision is the result of a bunch of factors. Some of those are unique to Southwest Airlines. And I'll just tell you what those are very quickly. First, compared to others, we have historically had a comparably high no-show rate. That's really because we have very flexible policies. We allow customers to change their flights, cancel their flights without a fee, and so you have more no-shows. That no-show rate has come down considerably over the years, though, as we have had better improvements in technology. And then second, we made a change where we simply ask customers who are not going to travel to please call and cancel that flight before they board the aircraft. They can cancel as late as boarding, and then they receive the ability just to reuse those funds without any kind of change or fee. Second, we are conducting a major upgrade to our reservation system, which is the largest system that any carrier uses. And the final components to that go into place on May the 9th. It's by far the most ambitious technical project we have ever undertaken at Southwest Airlines. And the implementation of that new reservation system gives us better data and better forecasting techniques, so we can basically we can predict better who is going to show up for a flight. And finally, I will be honest, while we've been looking at this issue for many years, the recent events related to overbooking did cause us to stop and pause and take a look at this again. It just gave us another reason to review and another reason to go ahead and move forward with this change today. And simply put, discontinuing the practice of overbooking is completely consistent with our other customer-friendly policies like bags fly free, no change fees, no cancel fees, points that never expire, award seats on every single flight every single day, so that we think that it fits perfectly with our brand. Now, it is important to note that we will still have oversells on a very small number of flights on occasion for operational reasons. Weather, you have weight and balance restrictions, we may have a down gauge where an aircraft that was 175 seats gets downgraded to an aircraft that's 143 seats. But we expect those to be very rare. And again, we will no longer overbook as part of the selling process. And most importantly to note, I expect that our denied boardings to go down by 80% as a result of this policy change. And today, denied boardings are very small. They are about 0.01% of every passenger that flies Southwest Airlines is affected by a denied boarding. And again, I expect that number to go down by 80% as a result of that policy change. So in conclusion, I wanted to thank you for inviting us here today, and I would be happy to take questions as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan. And with that, Ms. Filipovich, you may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Carrie Filipovich, and I am Senior Vice President of Customer Experience at American Airlines. Thank you for inviting me to talk with you today about American Airlines' focus on improving customer service. American Airlines is a global airline operating nearly 7,000 daily flights to 350 destinations in 50 countries. Our mission is to validate the trust placed in us by our customers, team members, and other stakeholders. There is no question that travel can be stressful and disruptions will occur. When they do, we first deliver a resolution to our customers, we commit to finding the root cause, and we incorporate those learnings quickly. It is this process that leads to continuous improvement at American Airlines. We work in a business that relies on people serving people, and with 120,000 team members who are spread around the globe, it will be difficult to avoid inconsistencies and occasionally falling short. On April 21st, an incident occurred on an American flight from San Francisco to Dallas-Fort Worth that involved one of our team members and a customer traveling with small children. Clearly, what happened was wrong, and we promptly apologized to the customers involved. Our immediate focus was on ensuring our customer and her children were cared for during the remainder of their trip. We issued a prompt public apology and reinforced that this incident did not reflect the values of our company and team members or how we care for our customers. We removed the team member in question from service to further investigate the situation. Situations like this are an outlier, but it is important for American to take responsibility when we don't handle things well, and we accept that responsibility completely. Recent incidents have been interpreted by some as evidence that customer service is broken in the airline industry. There's no question that we can do better, but we are making progress. Overall, airline customer satisfaction increased in 2016, reaching an all-time high in the J.D. Power airline ratings and tying the record in the 2016 American Customer Satisfaction Index Travel Report. In fact, industry ratings in both reports have improved each year since 2012. On the other side of decades of turmoil, we have been hard at work to enhance our customers' experience, and we're seeing the results of our frontline team members' hard work to improve the reliability of our operation. American delivered our best ever performance this year for mainline flights departing on time, arriving on time, and our lowest rates of mishandled baggage. Running a reliable operation is the foundation for delivering the experience that our customers deserve. Today, the U.S. airline industry is stable, the safest in the world, reliable, competitive, and most importantly, widely accessible. This is an intensely competitive industry with carriers offering different prices, products, and service. This competition is good for consumers. Adjusted for inflation, the average cost of an airline ticket has decreased by more than 24% since 1995. At the same time, we're also making significant investments to improve customer experience. At American, we take delivery of a new aircraft on average every 4 days. We're devoting nearly $3 billion in investing to make the travel experience more comfortable and more convenient. And we have $17 billion in capital improvement projects underway at multiple airports in which we operate. This includes a new regional terminal here at Washington Reagan National Airport, so we can once and for all retire the dreaded Gate 35X. Other events have drawn concern about customer impacts from overbooking flights. Given the frequency with which travelers adjust their plans, overbooking avoids empty seats in a congested air traffic system, allowing more people to fly and greater availability of lower fares. An oversale situation occurs when more confirmed passengers arrive at the gate than the number of seats on the aircraft. More than 50% of oversales are driven not by overbooking, but by operational and safety factors like equipment swaps, weather-driven weight restrictions, and accommodating federal air marshals. In light of recent events, American has added the following initiatives to our efforts to improve customer experience. First, we committed that we will not involuntarily remove a customer who has already boarded the aircraft to accommodate another passenger. Second, we've increased the number of employees who monitor oversales and work to solicit volunteers prior to customers arriving at the airport. New procedures are already showing a reduction to the previous low numbers of involuntary denied boardings as we work to bring that number closer to zero. Third, there is now a dedicated hotline into our day of departure support desk so our gate agents can offer the compensation necessary to entice customers to volunteer. We have not established an upper limit on what we will pay to solicit volunteers, but have entrusted our team to make the best decisions to serve our customers. Lastly, we are adding training for our customer-facing team members to strengthen their abilities to avoid and de-escalate contentious situations in real time. This is a time of great optimism at American Airlines and for air travel in our country. American is committed to validating the trust our customers, team members, and stakeholders place in us each day. We look forward to our continued work together to make this economic engine of our country all that it can be so Americans everywhere have the choice to travel affordably, safely, and comfortably. I appreciate the chance to be here, and I'm pleased to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. And with that, Mr. McGee, may proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Schuster, Ranking Member DeFazio, Chairman Lobiondo, and Ranking Member Larson, and all committee members. On behalf of Consumers Union, the policy arm of Consumer Reports, thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the concerns of millions of American air travelers. The abusive treatment of Dr. David Dow on board United Express last month shocked us all and exemplified that consumers are at the mercy of powerful airlines in an ever more concentrated industry. American consumers are very much aware that Dr. Dow's fate could all too easily have been their own. This incident and other recent media reports has re-galvanized Congress, and we applaud this committee for calling this hearing. The major airlines may boast of investing millions into their operations, but a closer examination reveals those investments often focus on amenities and perks for the few who can afford to pay more to fly in premium classes, while the overwhelming bulk of passengers in economy are subjected to packed cabins, tight seats, new and higher add-on fees, and, all too often, an utter lack of respect. We hope the committee will take this opportunity not only to address overbooking and denied boarding, but to take a broader look at the one-sided contracts of carriage that give all rights to airlines and precious few rights to passengers. Dr. Dow's mistreatment highlights one aspect of passenger rights that is badly in need of reining in: airlines overbooking flights and then not having seats for all passengers who bought tickets. This practice is a throwback to the 1950s, when passengers could make multiple alternative bookings without penalty. But since deregulation in 1978, 4 key factors have emerged. 1, no-show passengers today are penalized, either with high fees or the forfeiture of their tickets. 2, state-of-the-art yield management systems allow airlines to closely manage selling all available seats. 3, the demise of once ubiquitous interline agreements that allowed bum passengers to be accommodated on rival carriers. And 4, record-high passenger loads, historically in the 50 to 60 percentile range, now average in the low 80s and regularly reach 100%. We are not aware of other industries in America where the business is given this kind of free license to oversell the product with so little accountability for failing to deliver. Last year, domestic carriers bumped 40,629 passengers against their will. Airline executives may tell you this is a small percentage, but they were bumped without explanation based on criteria known only to the airline and missed family events, business meetings, vacations. United and other carriers announced changes to their policies, but we believe that all denied boardings should truly be voluntary. The airline should pay whatever compensation is necessary to convince a passenger to willingly give up a seat for any reason. Airline industry consolidation, and most particularly the mega mergers since 2008 of Delta Northwest, United Continental, and American U.S. Airways, has hurt consumers and entire communities. The harmful effects of this consolidation have come home to roost in numerous ways. A lack of competition and consumer choice allows carriers to disregard the interests and concerns of their passengers in ways that would have been unthinkable when there were 12 or 10 or even 8 major airlines in the United States. Compounding the harmful effects of industry concentration, passenger protections are further compromised because the Airline Deregulation Act preempted state consumer protection laws. The intent was to keep states from reimposing economic regulation, but consumers do not have the right of action to sue. And courts cited the Federal Preemption Clause in striking down New York State's 2007 Airline Passenger Bill of Rights. It's also become more difficult for consumers to determine the true cost of flying. Basic services such as checking baggage, selecting seats, changing flight reservations, even carrying on a small bag in some cases, are subject to higher and higher fees. This means it's no longer possible to make accurate apples-to-apples comparisons to previous airfares. We are calling for a consistent, uniform, comprehensive, clearly written set of passenger rights for U.S. airlines. What we cannot do is continue to leave it to the airlines to decide what rights they will confer in their contracts of carriage, which, as Consumer Reports has documented over the years, are lengthy, filled with legal jargon, and where the priority is to protect the airline, not its passengers, and are subject to change whenever it suits the airline. Here's an example taken from Delta's contract of carriage. Quote, Delta's published schedules are not guaranteed and form no part of this contract. Delta may substitute alternate carriers or aircraft, delay or cancel flights, change seat assignments, and alter or omit stopping places shown on the ticket at any time. Schedules are subject to change without notice, close quote. And here are some of the passenger protections we endorse. Clear and consistent guidelines for compensation for flight delays of varying lengths, clear and consistent guidelines for compensation for flight cancellations, clear and consistent guidelines for mishandled baggage, clear and consistent guidelines for compensation for voluntary relinquishment of a ticketed seat, and a clear prohibition on involuntary relinquishment. Complete airfare transparency, including all taxes and surcharges and all possible ancillary fees from the airlines, equally available in all booking channels, online and offline, whether offered directly by the airlines themselves or offered through third parties. Enforcement of minimum seat standards to ensure reasonable passenger comfort, address health concerns, including the risk of deep vein thrombosis, and promote safety, including adequate space for effective evacuation. Much has happened in the nearly 4 decades since passage of the Airline Deregulation Act, but some of the key promises of deregulation, especially enhanced competition and improved customer experience, have not been realized. These disturbing incidents of passenger mistreatment have made clear we need to start a conversation immediately. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McGee. Now we'll proceed to questioning. Members will have 5 minutes to ask their questions, and we'll stay pretty close to the, not pretty close, we'll stay very close to the 5-minute time frame on the questioning. So I'd ask all members to respect that. We'll watch the clock, and I'll begin by questioning. I truly believe that that what happened over these past couple of incidents deals with empowering the employees, and I looked at everything through the prism of 20 years in business myself, and many times situations would occur. My employees, hopefully with the proper training, the proper policies in place, they'd make the right decision, but occasionally they didn't, but we always stood by those decisions, and making sure that the customer was taken first was always paramount. And as I said, I believe that to empower your employees, you have to have clear policies in place so they understand what's expected, and they have to be trained so that they can develop the judgment. So I'm interested hearing from Mr. Munoz and from Ms. Filipovich, since 2 situations that occurred most recently. What are you doing to make sure that your employees are empowered specifically? Mr. Munoz, why don't you start?
Sure. Our curriculum for customer service and training and dealing with de-escalation issues is something we have to strengthen. I think we do it when you're first hired, but we don't do it on a recurring basis. So there's lots to learn from some of the other folks at this table. Specifically on the empowerment angle is beyond the empowerment at the point of a situation like we were faced with on April 9th. I think it's incumbent upon us to put policies and practices and protocols that inhibit or prohibit us ever getting into a situation like that. It's an impossible situation when you put folks in that kind of state, and no rules, no empowerment, no training can deal with that. So it's important to go back in the chain, and which is the policies that we've implemented, to say we're not going to deboard someone if they've already been set. We're not going to allow law enforcement. We are going to reduce overbooking, although that wasn't a factor in this particular case. So for us, there's training and curriculum. We'll continue to do that and learn from others at this table. But most importantly, it's important to it's the start of the chain, just not create these impossible situations for people that there is no out.
Filipovich?
Yes, I would agree with Mr. Munoz, and we know that it is the responsibility of airline leadership to make sure that our employees have the proper tools, training, resources, and support to deliver the kind of customer service that they're so good at doing and that they want to do every day. We recently launched a service training initiative for frontline team members called Elevate the Everyday Experience. It's a 2-day program, and by this summer, over 40,000 of our team members will have completed the cross-functional experiential learning course that we're very excited about. In light of recent events, and also based on feedback from our employees, we're working to enhance that curriculum to further support our employees with training on de-escalating complicated situations, and to provide kind of interim training between those sessions as well. So we're looking forward to that, and again, want to make sure our employees have the support and the tools that they need.
Well, thank you. Second question, it's on overbooking. I think I basically understand the overbooking situation, but I know there's refundable and non-refundable tickets, and it's been my experience in business, if somebody buys a product and they pay for it, they get it. So can you explain to me the difference how refundable and non-refundable customers are treated when it comes to not putting them on a flight, refunding their dollars, those kinds of things? Mr. Munoz, if you would.
Sure, there's many practices and procedures, and one of the reasons Mr. Kirby's with me today, he's been in this industry for 20 years and is very widely recognized as an expert in this field, and I thought this committee deserved a more exacting knowledge base, and so if I could.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman Schuster. As we've talked about, this incident was not driven, the incident on United was not driven by overbooking, but overbooking is much in the news about this. And it's important to understand that most of our oversale situations are driven by operational restrictions, the largest being weight restrictions because of weather. So, for example, when you're at an airport and there's snow or ice or even wind and weather at either the departure or arrival airport, we're often not able to take a full load of customers and meet our safety parameters. And in those situations, we will have to deplane 20, 30 people sometimes because the aircraft simply can't operate safely. That is the vast majority of our oversale situations. As to overbooking, we also use it to actually take care of thousands of customers who we otherwise couldn't accommodate. Just this past weekend, we had an incident in Mumbai where an airplane, an engine went out of service on landing, and we were going to have to replace the engine, which takes a while in India to get the engine replaced. So we had to cancel the return flight. We reaccommodated a couple of hundred customers on other airlines, but because there were so many, we had customers still to deal with. We overbooked the following day's flight by 48 customers because that was the only seats that we had. Otherwise, we were telling those customers we couldn't get them home for 5 days. We were able to accommodate 25 customers the next day, and the other 23 we were able to voluntarily give them compensation to take a flight the next day. But it's an example where overbooking actually helped us take care of our customers. And at United, the vast majority of our involuntary denied boardings are driven by these operational restrictions as opposed to overbooking. And we view overbooking, if we're particularly in situations where we can incentivize a customer to take an alternative flight, as a win-win for both the airline and for those customers. And 96% of the situations where we have overbooking, we're able to get the customers to be volunteers. And in today's world where we've increased the compensation limit to $10,000, we're hoping to drive that down to essentially zero. So we view overbooking as something that actually helps us accommodate and take care of thousands more customers than we would otherwise be able to.
Thank you, Mr. Kirby. I've exceeded my time. I'm going to stay on message for the 5 minutes, but I wish you could, in writing, explain to me the refundable, non-refundable, and what the difference is in writing. That'd be fine.
Yes, sir, we will.
With that, I recognize Mr. DeFazio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and do this very quickly. We don't have much time. First, to United, American, and Alaska, how much does it cost you to change someone's booking? Give me a number. I mean, you're charging people $200, $300 to change a ticket. What's your real cost? I mean, it seems like it really shouldn't. You're really inefficient if it costs that much.
Well, sir, the cost is not about the actual changing the ticket. I don't know what the actual changing of the ticket costs.
Okay, so then it's about being very profitable. I would observe that United got $800 million in change fees last year. $800 million. That is a lot of money.
Sir,
And there's no real cost? I mean, I realized, you said, and let's go back to well, first, how about, can you answer? Southwest does not do this, so can American answer? How much does it cost to change someone's ticket?
I would agree with Mr. Kirby. The cost is not about the
Right,
processing
it's for
of
your
the ticket. It's
operational
about
concerns, so you
holding
can
the inventory.
get the planes absolutely full or sell more than 100% of the seats. Okay, let's go to overbooking. On overbooking, now Southwest, are you going to go broke or something? I mean, you're not going to overbook anymore? How can you do that? Quick answer.
We are not going to go broke, I promise
Okay.
you that.
So-
What happened, it's really basic. There are a couple of reasons that cause you the need to overbook. We have no-shows. The
Right.
no-shows at Southwest have come down materially over the years as we've had better technology.
Sure.
We actually have more no-shows than most because we have very flexible rules, no change fees,
Okay, but
no
some are
cancel
you- so-
fees.
okay.
So those have come down. And then second, we just improved our technology to really understand who's going to show at the aircraft. And then third, we did implement a pretty modest change, which is
Okay,
allowing.
I've only got 5 minutes, so
Okay.
I got it. Okay, Mr. McGee, do you want to comment on the practice of overbooking? You said it was 1950s, 1960s, because in those days you didn't get charged. You weren't making $800 million on change fees.
Exactly. At that time, it was a burden for airlines because business travelers in particular used to book 5 flights at once and get one of them, and then those seats went empty. But for all the reasons that I detailed, which I don't want to repeat for time's sake, it's clear that that time has passed. And all of the language in the contracts, as I stated, favor the airlines here. If you're delayed getting to the airport because your taxi driver had an accident and you have a non-refundable ticket, you're out, regardless. There's no provision in the contract that accommodates for your circumstances. But yet there's a long list of accommodations for circumstances for the airline, or what they term force majeure, acts of God, which in some cases are, in fact, not acts of God.
Right. Okay, thank you. So back to Mr. Kirby, you said that, you talked about how you can use overbooking to help people. How about just a policy that in routine reservations you would never, ever overbook? You would never sell more than 100% of the seats for routine day-to-day booking, not to accommodate people because of a change of plane or something else, but just on a day-to-day basis. Could
Well,
you
sir,
do that? I mean, Southwest is doing that.
Well, sir, we still think that helps us accommodate thousands of
Yeah,
customers.
but it also helps you make, get to these load factors, and then, of course, you have your change fees. Let's go to contracts of carriage. How about a simple disclosure? I mean, this is United's contract of carriage. This is just for fares. And if you look at the print here, very user-friendly online. Supposed to read this before you buy your ticket. So how about a, distilled down, simple language disclosure? Would any of the airlines agree to do that, post that, make it available to people? I see Mr. Sprague nodding his head.
Yeah, we would acknowledge. Ours is too long. We recently acquired Virgin America Airlines. We found theirs to be much shorter. As part of our integration, we're going to move to a much more shorter and more efficient contract of carriage.
Right, theirs is 20 pages, 8,000 words. Yours was 37,000 words. United was 37,000 words with smaller print on only 46 pages, but I don't think that counts because it doesn't make it much more user-friendly. One other question. As we've observed, there's a lot of tension in the planes. You're jamming more people in. And yet, is there a question about how many flight attendants there should be on planes as opposed to the FAA requirement? Because they're being asked essentially to referee and do all sorts of things, and we've got terrorism. I mean, everything has changed. But the number of flight attendants hasn't changed as required by the FAA for per passenger for 20 years or so. Anybody think that maybe we're overstressing our flight attendants? Mr. McGee, you want to answer?
Yes, there's been a lot of talk today about employees, and the term is used. It's been used multiple times. But I think an important point here is that this is an industry that has massively outsourced so many functions, including functions that interface with the public. So I'm not sure that many passengers are even aware that when they check in or when they're speaking to a customer service agent, in fact, in many cases, they're wearing a uniform of an airline, and they have a name tag from an airline, but they're outsourced. And what this means for passengers is that in no way are we denigrating the work of the people looking for jobs, but the fact is they're poorly trained. It's a transient workforce, and the airlines have outsourced just about everything that the FAA will allow in outsourcing. We're not here today to talk about aircraft maintenance, but that's one area that affects safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just yesterday morning at the Knoxville airport, the plane we were supposed to fly on to Washington, a wing clipped a baggage truck with damage that you couldn't even notice, but we spent 3.5 hours there. They had trouble getting a hold of the proper person at the manufacturers in Brazil, and then they canceled the plane. And it caused me to miss votes last night, and I hate to miss votes, but I tell you this, just to tell you that I've flown so much over the years that I've run into almost every kind of problem that you can think of, yet I will tell you that we have the best aviation system in the entire world. My dad told me years ago, he said, everything looks easy from a distance, but you all have a very tough business. But I think what happens when people have 99 good flights and one bad one, the one they tell everybody about's the one bad one. I am so thankful. I heard on NPR many years ago that the Russian Aeroflot system sometimes had delays as long as 4 days. I mean, we get upset with a 40-minute delay. So I appreciate what you do for us. Let me ask you this, Mr. Munoz. Before this unfortunate incident with Dr. Dow, did your airline ever call law enforcement to remove somebody due to overbooking before that incident?
There have been a good amount of occasions where that has happened. It happened without incident.
Where you had to call law enforcement due to overbooking?
We call law enforcement for safety and security reasons when they happen. There have been occurrences in the past, in this year, where we've had to ask law enforcement to come in and help and assist.
Have any of your other airlines had law enforcement remove people from the airline due to overbooking? Have you ever done that you know of, Mr. Jordan?
No, sir, nothing I know of. Again, I agree with Oscar. It's primarily in the cases of just safety and security where you have potentially an intoxicated passenger.
Well, I mean, if it's a disruptive person with a law enforcement, that's a different situation.
Yes, sir. But in the case of
I'm talking about due to overbooking.
In the case of an overbooking, nothing I know of, sir.
We were given statistics. There's something called the airline quality rating, and it said that there is removed involuntarily denied boardings affected 6 passengers per 100,000. And I noticed in Mr. McGee's testimony, he said it was 40,000, or a little over 40,000, out of the almost 700 million passengers. That comes to one for every 17,500 roughly. It seems to me that's a pretty low, that's a pretty impressive figure. We also were submitted information from another airline that's not here that said that overbooking has been done so that as one of the many ways that ticket prices are held lower. Is that correct, Mr. Sprague?
Yes, Congressman Duncan, that's correct. And in fact, for Alaska Airlines in 2016 alone, there were 675,000 seats that would not have been available if we did not have an overbooking policy. So those are seats that would not have been available for last-minute business travel purchases, for accommodating guests that might have been disrupted due to weather or a downsized aircraft. And frankly, having those additional seats available for sale allows us to keep fares low.
So more people are able to fly at lower prices because of overbooking?
Yes, sir.
Is that true? Would you agree with that, Mr. Kirby?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. With that, Ms. Norton is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I know you must have received messages from a number of us after the first incident about the need for more oversight by this committee of the customer service part of what the airlines do for us as a nation. I want to say to our witnesses, you may think you're looking at members of Congress, but really you're looking at your customer base. Except for a few of us, perhaps me chiefly among them, because I represent the people who live in the nation's capital, most members of Congress get on an airplane every single week. Frequent flyers who do weekly monitoring. I can't imagine why we haven't had a hearing like this based on what my colleagues have go through. Now, when it comes to business in the United States, I expect and have seen competition solve most of our problems. But essentially, you represent 4 regional monopolies. So you've been able to do anything you want to do. Add-on fees, basic services that we take for granted. It's as if you have to tip a corporation to get a business to do what they used to do for free as a courtesy. So over time, we do have such hearings as this, and people come up with notions, well, we ought to have a passenger bill of rights or whatever. Mr. DeFazio, our ranking member, in '87 or less, entered a document. It didn't pass. But Ray LaHood, the U.S. Transportation Secretary, because this could be done by the administrative process as well, indeed was successful in getting through that process. Rules having to do, for example, with lost baggage. So what we have here essentially are a passenger's bill of rights. Each of you have a contract. We've learned that, you can find out what it is if you go on the website, or if you can look at the tens and tens of pages. I want to clarify whether I believe was the response to Mrs. DeFazio, are each of the airlines here willing to boil down what the customer is entitled to a one-page, a one-pager that the passenger could receive as part of getting on the flight or could find by going to the website? Could I have answers from each of the airlines? I only have 5 minutes. Speak up first, Mr. Munoz. Why point to him? Why not begin with you?
It's an excellent question. I don't know that I have the proper answer with regards to a one-page document. I think simplification, clarity.
Mr. Kirby, do you think, since that could happen?
Ma'am, I'm not sure if we can get it to one page, but I certainly think getting a simpler contract to carriage.
Anybody else have people who can write, who could boil this down to one page? Could we go down, Mr. Sprague?
That would be our goal, ma'am.
Sir?
That would be our goal, ma'am.
Congresswoman, absolutely, we would love to continue to consolidate that. I would tell you we also have a customer service commitment document, which writes it in much simpler language. We already have that on our website that describes what Southwest Airlines does. but the goal is to be completely transparent with the customer about what is available to them in any case.
And we at American have been working to simplify our policies to make them clear on our website for our customers, and we would also like to strive for a more simplified contract of carriage, and we have work underway for that as well.
I think we're going to hold you all accountable for that and see who's best at doing something that you may have learned to do in college if you had good writing instruction. Mr. Jordan, do I understand that Southwest Airlines, because this is my favorite way to do things in our country, has found that using incentives, you can indeed solve problems that are otherwise solved by remedies such as overbooking? Your incentivizing approach, where you say you brought down the number of involuntary involuntaries where boarding does not occur.
Yes, ma'am. Our goal, again, is with this change in not overbooking as part of the selling process.
Well, what was the incentive that was most important?
The incentive was to eliminate this problem for our customers and to some extent for our employees.
No, that you gave so that you did not have to overbook.
Well,
to the customer, so you didn't have to overbook.
Well, actually, it's on the airline side. We've had better technology, those things that allows us to eliminate this process because of the value to the airline has simply gone down very, very much. But it would be our incentive to have involuntary denied boardings in particular be very, very rare. And it's also our incentive, and we do this every day, to make sure that our employees are completely empowered to do what is right, involuntary denied boarding or voluntary denied boarding, to do what is right for our customers in the moment so that we don't have incidents that we shouldn't.
Thank the gentleman. And I would just point out, I think these contracts of carriage are far too complicated, and simplifying would be wonderful, but every member on this committee should look at each other and say, part of the problem is us. Part of the problem is the overabundance of attorneys in this country that are sue happy, so a little bit of tort reform may be able to let the industry, not just this industry, but every industry, to simplify what they put out there in contracts, because it's, again, I'm not going to get into it right now, but I'm pretty sure it's driven by the damn lawsuits in this country that go forward. And so we've got to, Congress has to make sure we're simplifying the laws so that we can get 1-page, 2-page, 10-page documents on these contracts of carriage. So with that, I recognize Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You probably felt the eyes of a lot of attorneys on you at that point in time. Mr. McGee, you touched on this in your testimony. Deregulation back in 1978. I'm a limited government guy. I don't want the government to get involved to solve problems in a competitive marketplace. But do you or any members on the panel, do you believe Congress should re-regulate the airline industry?
Consumers Union supported deregulation in 1978, long before my time. I was in high school at the time. But we have at no time in the 17 years I've been with Consumers Union recommended re-regulation. What we have said is that it's clear that when you leave customer service up to the airlines on many issues over the years, tarmac delays and other things, they do not do what's best for their airlines, for their customers. And in answer to the Congresswoman's question about simple language and 1 page, actually it is possible to an extent because the model already exists in the European Union. For 12 years, there have been passenger rights, easily accessible, easy to read, 1 page on the EU's website. When you're traveling in the EU,
Let's let some of the other members weigh in on this just in the limited time that I have.
We work in a very competitive industry, and we know that customer service is essential to retaining our customers, so that is our incentive to do better, and we will. The DOT today also exercises broad oversight in regulating airlines and protecting consumers as well.
Okay. Mr. Jordan?
And while we're talking about very difficult issues today, generally, the performance of the industry has been very good. On Southwest's sake, our Net Promoter Scores are 11 points better in the last 2 years. Our OTP is up 7 points.
So that's
our,
a no
our bag
on
rates,
on,
our bag rates are the best that
re-regulation?
they've been in our history, so no, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. I've been with Alaska Airlines for 17 years, and that entire time, we've been competing hard against the rest of the folks on the panel here today, and that competition has been our main motivation to improve our customer service.
Mr. Munoz?
Agreed with most of those. So the answer for us would be also no. But my context and perspective is having worked in heavily regulated industries, both in telecom and other transportation models in the railroad space, and having a chance to see this over the last year. I think there's always a delicate balance between the right things, as Mr. McGee writes.
Well, I think that's right, and what we've heard today sort of demonstrates kind of the line we're walking here. And I don't want to jump into a competitive model and apply re-regulation, but that means that the industry has to do some self-regulation to demonstrate that you don't need interference from Congress.
I couldn't agree more, and it's shameful that an event like the one that we had at United has to drive this kind of conversation. But again, it will accelerate, at least from United's perspective, and as you heard from others, this will make us better.
Let me ask you something. This was Mr. DeFazio touched on this, and I could see that virtually everybody in their chairs was uncomfortable, and the body language was evident. This is not a topic anybody wants to talk about. But the change fees. And there's a relationship to overbooking and change fees, is there not?
Yes, sir. I mean, we have change fees, and they're mostly about our way of offering low fares to consumers.
Sure.
And they're about keeping our fares low. And as was referenced earlier today, you know, fares have declined 24% in the last 20 years in real terms. One of the great things about deregulation and about these kinds of policies, overbooking and change fees, is that we've driven prices lower for consumers, and there's more people traveling in the United States than anywhere in the world.
Ma'am, I could tell you had some things you wanted to add when that conversation was taking place. Would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Sure, thank you, sir. We strive to offer different fare products to meet the needs of varying consumers. And so some customers will value flexibility and be willing to pay more for an unrestricted ticket, while others really just want the lowest fare, and that's why we sell a non-refundable product. Even though customers have agreed to a non-refundable product, the change fee is a way to allow some flexibility if a circumstance arise that they didn't anticipate.
This sort of gets back to what we talked about with full disclosure on what you can expect as a customer. And all of y'all are competing. I love a competitive model because customer service generally thrives in a competitive environment. But we're not seeing that today with consolidation. We've seen a sharp decline in the level of customer service that is related to the amount of consolidation that's taken place in the last 10, 12, 15 years. And I think that's probably an experience we've all had at some point in time in our air travels. Is that fair?
I'll take it initially. I've experienced a lot of consolidation in my experiences over the history, and I think the customer has an infinite amount greater choice today than they've had in a long period of time. And Scott, who's been in this industry for 20 years, has been part of many integrations and consolidations. He could probably share insights as well.
Well, my time has expired, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you. Yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Johnson's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask, I guess in general, but most especially for United. First of all, it's clear that we have so much air traffic. And the incident on April the 9th involving the forcible removal of a passenger on board at United Flight 3411 has brought into question how airlines treat its passengers. And this really is not a new issue. In 2016, the Department of Transportation received 12,766 consumer complaints against U.S. airlines. So it's impossible to say how many of these are legitimate, illegitimate, how many other incidences were unreported. But I guess what I need to ask first is, what were the rules in place to determine who would be removed from the plane?
Thank you, ma'am. It was a simple, automatic process that dealt with, without all the complexity, what someone paid and whether they were enrolled in our Mileage Plus program. It is a difficult choice when we get to that point. All our policies that we've introduced are to prevent this situation ever from happening, because it is an impossible situation. How do you pick amongst all of you as to who sits where? You have a process for where you sit, and we have a process. And so specifically, the policy that we had and continue to have is around the fare that you paid and whether you're not, what level you were in our mileage.
So this fare was cheaper than the rest of them, or the cheapest, I guess.
It was one of the lower fares, yes.
What about the rest of you? Is that the way you determine who to mistreat?
Congresswoman, no. In the case of an involuntary denied boarding, our selection criteria is tied to whether or not the customer had a seat assignment. And if there are multiple customers that have a seat assignment, it would be based on the last customer to check in for the flight.
Congresswoman, same thing here, being very egalitarian. It's basically the last person that checked in at the gate, arrived at the gate and again, our goal is to always not have any involuntary, but to treat all those folks as a voluntary denied boarding if we have to, and deal with that before boarding. But no, it's in the order of basically the check-in at the gate.
So if someone checks in and is given a seat, and someone checks in later who paid more for a seat, they can unseat the person who is seated?
No, ma'am. In the case, again, of Southwest, if the aircraft has 143 seats, for example, and the 144th person, the overbook, checks in, they do not have a seat. So they would be the first person that we attempt to work with to voluntarily deny board them through compensation.
Okay. But I understand this person was seated, had been admitted by a ticket, and was seated in a seat. And the person who they were trying to get on did not have to purchase a seat. So how do you make that criteria?
It was a mistake of epic proportions in hindsight, clearly, and our policies broke down in that regard. The situation specifically was that a crew member trying to get to another flight, in essence ironically, in a customer service-oriented fashion, to try and make sure that that crew arrived at the next aircraft so 150 people could get to their destinations. And it's a horrible calculus to put people in. Do you make the flight for 150, or you seriously inconvenience 2 or 3 on the current flight? And so one of the policy changes we introduced last week is that once you sit on our aircraft and you are on a seat, other than for safety or security reasons, we will not take you off that flight.
Okay, now, I understand there were 4 seats needed, 3 had been given. If that one person had not arrived at the next spot, would that have stopped that airline from taking off?
Yes, ma'am. There's a certain level of in-flight and flight ops crews that we have to have on an aircraft, and it would not have left. And we did try to find alternative aspects with regards to getting a different flight crew in there. But this is a fairly well-orchestrated process throughout the world to get 700 flights in the air on any given moment. And so flight crews are not readily available in all our different locations. So we did try to look at that process. But
so you have 2 groups of rules to look at. Did you address the rule of what happens if a person, I'm sorry, my time is out, but let me just finish this question for you to think about. If that person had not gotten to the next flight that you were trying to get there, what is the alternative if that person couldn't get there with 3 already?
Sure. And we have a policy that we built in. I'm happy to follow up with you.
Thank you, gentlelady. With that, recognize Mr. Hunter for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, to all of you, thank you for being here. I fly from San Diego, so I've got one of the longest flights, and I fly back every week because I have kids. So I guess my first question I was going to ask, only slightly in jest, is why do you hate the American people? But I'm not going to ask that. I was going to ask how much you hate the American people. I'm not going to ask that either. What I have heard a lot of you talk about is competition. Explain that to me, because I think that's a joke. It's an absolute joke that there's competition within the airline industry. If you just look at San Diego, it's United Airlines. I have no other options unless I want to fly to San Francisco or LA or Texas or Chicago. There's only one straight shot to another United-owned hub, Dulles Airport. That's it. So any of you, please, explain the competition for a layman like me that must not understand it very well. Because competition, really quick, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, Wendy's, that's competition. Hertz, Budget, Avis, that's competition. Having only one airline that flies one straight shot out of all the airlines, that's not competition. So please explain it to me.
Sure. Congressman Hunter, just speaking for Southwest Airlines, I can assure you the competition level that we are experiencing right now, which is defined basically in a couple of ways. How many of our routes are overlapped by other carriers where we have competition, and particularly we look at where we are overlapped by the ultra low-cost carriers, the Frontiers, the Spirits. It has never been higher, and it is climbing at a rate every single year that is at a higher rate than the year before. So we have never had more competition in our history. And the best measure is probably fares, because fares ultimately are tied to competition, and they were down in the fourth quarter of 2016, 3% from 15, and they are down 6% from 2014, so fares have continued to fall. Our average fare today is $152, which inflation adjusted is below a decade ago.
You wouldn't describe competition as options?
Again, I would describe it as where we are overlapped with other carriers, where we do have competition. And of course, you're going to have routes where there are very few options, and you're going to have routes where there are many, many, many options. It differs route to route, but I can assure you.
Let me interrupt really quick. Mr. Munoz, at your Houston hub, what percentage of the flights are operated by United?
I would think in the 60 to 70%.
So 60 or 70%, if you're in Houston, you're going to fly a United flight most likely.
Right, and it's infinitely less than our 6 other hubs.
Ms. Filipovich, same question for you about the Dallas hub.
Yes, one thing I think it's important to note is that the purpose of hubs is to build factories that can manufacture connections. And more than half of the customers flying in and out of our hubs, or in some cases like our Charlotte hub, 70% of our customers are connecting there. So it's not just about the origin and destination market, because there are a lot of different ways that we build routes across the country.
Okay, so would any of you concede, even in the smallest way, that in some hubs and some airports, there aren't a lot of options except for just one of you? Would you not concede that in a small way?
I think from a common sense perspective, absolutely. It does occur in certain markets, but we all have broader aspects. But with the concept of competition, and again, a different perspective from other industries, if you think of when I used to work at both Coke and Pepsi, those are two options that have consolidated over the years to provide 2 offerings to the American public. That seems to work okay. I used to work in the telecom space, and between AT&T and Verizon, you have that. And in both those areas, a lot of product offerings, a lot of additional things, and a lot of continued healthy competition. But that's the perspective that I bring from the outside. I'd let Scott talk a little bit about the competition dynamic inside this industry.
Yeah, Representative,
by the way, this is different than any other thing because we don't have a choice. I have to fly. The American people have to fly all the time. We don't have a choice. You have a choice to not buy a Pepsi. You have a choice to not go with Verizon, or you can go with T-Mobile or Sprint, because that is highly regulated by this Congress, telecommunications, more so than it is with you all. But there's no option to not fly is the big difference here.
Yes, sir. I would say that this is a highly, highly competitive industry. You can see it in the fares declining. You can see it in the different kinds of product offerings that you can get across airlines. There are markets where there's only one nonstop carrier, although north of 90% of our customers are flying in markets where there either is nonstop carrier competition or we're carrying connecting customers. So half our customers are flying in connecting markets, which obviously have lots of competition. And even in those markets like Dulles to San Diego, more than half the people that fly between Washington, D.C. and San Diego choose to make a connection. So they're choosing to take a connection on someone other than United Airlines, even though we're the only nonstop carrier in that market. And in a market like Washington Dulles to San Diego, there's nothing to prevent another airline from coming in and flying in that market. So it's a hugely competitive market. There are instances where they're unusual, where there's only a single carrier in the market, but it's still a hugely competitive market, and there almost always are connecting alternatives for customers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I would quickly add to, again, it's a route-by-route thing. You can find exceptions, but the vast majority of routes have a great deal of competition on them.
Thank the gentleman. We anticipate this to be a long hearing, so we're going to take periodic breaks. This is our first 5-minute breaks. This is only for the witnesses and the members. Those of you in the audience can go after the break, because I don't want mass rush to the restrooms if necessary. So, Adam, start the clock, 5 minutes. The committee will come back to order, please. Everybody take their seats. Everybody get settled in. Thank you very much. I now recognize Mr. Larson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Munoz, I need to let you know I'm not quite satisfied with an answer you gave to Mr. Duncan earlier, so I just want to explore it. The question asked of you was whether, I believe it was whether United used law enforcement at all to remove a person for overbooking, and you talked about safety and security twice in response to the question. So it seemed to either be a pat answer or, I don't know. So let me just be specific. Has United this year removed anyone using security personnel strictly on an overbooking issue?
I am not aware of any specific instance where law enforcement has removed something for that particular oversold situation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. That's clear. Can I ask you? Are you free to? Are you able to tell us what United management or the site manager communicated to law enforcement that day on regarding the customer on United 3411? Was this person? Did they say this person's disruptive and needs to be removed, or did they say this person won't take $800 and needs to be removed?
It wasn't nearly as specific as that. I think the failed policy and procedure that we have is that after the attempts to incentivize a customer with that amount and other amounts, the protocol, the policy called for asking for assistance from local law enforcement, and that's wrong.
And so what change have you made? Can you let us know what change you made in your policies with regards to that?
Well, first of all, the $800, for instance, can go up to $10,000, offering alternative solutions for that passenger to fly, because it's not just about money for some folks. We had kids on that flight. People, it's how do you get to my destination? And then, of course, what we did is we will no longer have law enforcement deboard anyone that's already been boarded on our aircraft.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think part of the concerns that we have, and a lot of us have, is that, sometimes we're guilty of this too, and we'll say this, you made your problem the customer's problem, and in this particular case. And so I think hearing from you all how you're not making problems you have about, getting your staff somewhere and making it a customer's putting the solution on the customer to solve your problem about getting staff somewhere is important. And that goes to, I think, to everybody.
I couldn't agree with you more, absolutely, which is why our crew members, unless they check in 60 minutes before check-in, they will not be allowed to do what happened, what actually triggered this whole event. So absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. Mr. Jordan, can you help me understand a little bit what we can expect to see from Southwest on May 8th or 9th with regards to OneRes and the upgrade? It looks like May 8th. With regards to OneRes, you know, last year we had the meltdown in your IT system that maybe not is directly the subject of this particular hearing. Certainly it didn't trigger this hearing, but it is certainly a customer service issue. So what's going to happen in this rollout that's going to make it, I think you called it, bigger and better than what you have now?
Yes, sir. It's the largest technology project we have ever undertaken. We have de-risked it in that we've been putting in pieces for literally almost a year now to ensure that they work as they go. There's extensive testing. We put in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours of training. We'll have hundreds and hundreds of employees in airports on the day of implementation to handle any issues that come up. The testing and all have gone flawless so far. Like any big software implementation, I expect some small problems on May 9th when we implement. But I think we are extremely well prepared, and I expect it to all go very, very well.
Well, I found though that small problems in the industry, in your industry, when it comes to IT, result in delays through an entire system. So so even saying small problems doesn't give me a lot of assurance. Can you help give me a little more assurance?
Again, we've tested this product more than any IT implementation we have ever done. We've implemented those pieces in phases so that we're not doing usually what happens with an airline is you put in something in a big bang implementation overnight, you wake up and it doesn't work very well the next morning. That's usually what goes wrong. What we've done is implement small pieces almost every week for literally almost a year now. Second, when we began to add international destinations, they are actually running on the new system and have been for more than a year. So we've been running it in production in a small way for a very long period of time. And then thirdly,
that's good. Just one last question for the record for United Airlines. If you guys get back to us and explain to us why this particular issue on April 9th was not an overbooking issue. You keep saying it wasn't an overbooking issue. The customer and everybody who watched it online saw it as an overbooking issue. So just
happy to get back.
Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Farenthold is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Schuster. And much like Mr. Hunter, I'm a pretty frequent flyer. I'm elite status on every airline up there except for Alaska, and that's probably just because you don't fly to Corpus Christi, Texas, hint, hint. But what I'm seeing is a growing level of frustration, both on the passengers and from your passenger-facing crew in the airport. Everybody's in a rush. We've had to deal with the TSA. We got to go buy some liquid to take on because you can't take that through security. You want to get some food, or you're stuck having to pay $12 for a TV dinner or $7 for a Lunchable on the airplane. Passengers are frustrated. Another piece of it is we're all rushing to get what limited bin space there were. Several years ago, the airlines all said the fuel costs are up, so we're going to start charging for checked bags to make up that revenue. Well, now the fuel costs are down. Are there any plans to remove the checked baggage fees, Mr. Munoz and Ms. Filipovich?
If you could, if I'm, Scott answer that?
Thank you, Congressman. And we view charging for checked bags as one of the ways that we keep all the other fares low. In 2016, at United, we spent about $1.9 billion carrying checked bags, and we collected about $900 million.
All right, so no. The answer is no. What about American?
Same. We put our fees in place to give customers more options and more choices and to pay for just the services that they intend to consume.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about Southwest. No checked bag fees. Mr. Kirby, you said you had to overbook flights to keep fares low. I can't remember the last time the United fare was lower than a Southwest fare. How are y'all able to do it at Southwest?
Just a couple of things, and we appreciate your business in Corpus Christi, by the way. We try to make policies that just make sense for the customer. We feel like if you're going to travel, it makes sense that you can bring your clothes along with you. And so, and specifically regarding the overhead bins, the no check bag fees allows people to check their bags, and so we actually have more bin space because they're checking the bags. And again, we strive to keep costs low. It's always been a tenet of our airline business all the way back to Herb, and keeping costs low allows us to do things like having no bag fees. And finally, we believe that we get more business overall because we do not charge fees.
Great. And Mr. Munoz, in the very much publicized incident that probably led to this hearing, the reason you had to get people off were you were trying to move a crew to get to their other airlines. United is my primary carrier, so one of the things I see a lot when I get delayed, it comes up on my app saying, awaiting inbound crew. What I don't understand is why don't you just keep the crew with the airplane? Why do the crews have to connect? Why couldn't you put the same crew with the same airline and take that one issue off the table?
I think it's a great thought, but there are rules and safety implications of making sure people get rest. And so the ability to keep crews on the same flight for an extended period of time is just not something that's easily doable.
All right, and then I had one other question for Mrs. Filovich about American. We're seeing reports in the media now about your new uniform having adverse reactions with over 3,000 flight attendants and now with pilots. My concern is not only with the safety of the crew, but also if there are toxic fumes or something that's released as a result of the circulating air or the heat on the airplanes, there's a potential risk for passengers. What is your airline doing to address the uniform issue? Or if you're not in a position to answer that, could you get somebody who can to get me the info?
No, I'm happy to give you information. And first, I just want to make sure to state that the safety and comfort of both our customers and our employees is absolutely our top priority. We launched a new uniform last fall and for about 75,000 of our team members. And the vast majority of them really like the product that we launched, and team members were involved in developing it as well. Shortly after launch, we did start getting some reports that some of our employees were experiencing some reactions to the uniform, despite the fact that we had put it through a couple of rounds of testing to ensure that it meets and exceeds industry standards. We've been working with those team members to make sure that they have alternative uniforms that they can wear, both different fabrics from the initial manufacturer of our program, and then also recently we just announced an additional manufacturer that can provide uniforms for our employees. So we'll continue to work with team members. It's an issue that we take very seriously and we're putting a lot of attention on.
Thank you. I hear from the tapping that my time has expired.
I thank the gentleman, and I also point out, as I said, made a little comment earlier, sometimes we put these rules and laws into place that these situations occur because the airlines are living with them, and it's not just the airlines, it's industries across America. So we've got to pay close attention to what we do and the way the response from the industry is. With that, I recognize Mr. Capuano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, lady, for being here. Here's the problem. Is that the flying experience, and again, we all do it on a regular basis, the flying experience is like everything else in life. The truth is, my flying experience is reasonable 90% of the time, but it has a lot to do with lowered expectations. When I was a kid, I grew up in a neighborhood that every single playground was full of broken glass, broken basketball hips, and no swings. And everybody just accepted it because it was the way it was. Now, it's not like that anymore, but it took us 20 years to change the attitude. People today in the same community that I grew up in would never accept that because the level of expectations have been risen. The problem with the flying experience is across the board. We all know it's a terrible experience. Starting from the minute I go on the computer to try to figure out which flight I want to take. I have to go to several different websites, and even when I do that, I have to go into the depth of the websites to get truly comparable prices because some don't charge fees, some do charge fees. Some charge fees for baggage, some charge fees for oxygen, who knows? I can't get comparable prices. So before I buy the ticket, I'm frustrated. I personally have shut that computer down repeatedly for many years because I got to go back to it, because you're right, I got to fly. And you got to go back and you got to dig your way through it. From the very start. But we all expect it to be a miserable experience. And then when I get to the airport, I have to get through the TSA lines, which now, being a regular flyer, I go through the express lines, but now the express lines are full of people that don't know to take their keys out of their pocket. Frustrating. Then I get to the gate. Plane's late, plane's not late, never explained why. Now, honestly, up until last week, bumping was not a problem. Now, I've been bumped on occasion, but it's been handled reasonably. By the way, Mr. Munoz, I want to know how to get that $10,000 thing, because, believe me, I'll be flying United a lot more. You can figure that out. Here's the problem. And even with these fees, it's interesting. I get the airlines coming here complaining about the facilities we have, and yet I see that in 2015, the latest year we have, $3.8 billion in fees, which don't pay the ticket tax, which means almost $300 million that could have been put into improving those facilities didn't, because you don't want to tell us what your tickets cost. It's all, to me, we're kind of sick of it as the consuming Americans. We got to fly. You got us. You got us. And if you want to keep treating us this way, fine. I guess we can only do so much. But there will come a day when Congress won't accept it anymore on behalf of the American people, and that shouldn't happen. Mr. Munoz, you had a particular problem last week. I accept your apology. I think it's genuine. I think you mean it. But here's the problem. The apology is a beginning, and the policies seem reasonable, the ones you have now. And I don't mean to pick on you, but, you know, it's your turn. The problem is, every year, I say, you know what? I'm going to the gym. I'm going to lose 5 pounds. I'm going to get in shape again. By February, I'm kind of out of it. I give up on it. Every person I know that's ever committed a crime has basically apologized for it, didn't mean to. And the apology is good. I'm not saying, and again, I do accept it. I hope and believe it's sincere today. But I hope you all know that this doesn't stop today. And you will be judged on how it is implemented. And it is not just you, Ms. Munoz. Again, it happens to be you today, but it could be any one of you tomorrow. And I presume you've all rechecked your own rules and regulations about how you do it, seeing that I'm sure you don't want to be in the hot seat the next time. So the truth is, I don't really have any questions because, again, I do think you've addressed the immediate situation. But if you walk out of here thinking that the immediate situation is the only problem the American public has with the flying experience, you would have missed the point. We have a problem that shouldn't be as bad and unpleasant as it is. And you're the only people that can fix it. And I encourage you to do so that we can get back to the point of nobody's against you making money. I don't want to yell at you. I just want to be able to go to the airport and get from point A to point B with a more pleasant experience. And if I do, believe me, I'll go back to your airline more often when that happens. Mr. Chairman, I apologize for not having a question, but I think all the questions I have been answered.
My new response to that is well said. Thank you. And with that, yield to Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, I was thinking about this. You really have a cultural problem for the incidents that happen on United with the doctor. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that the pilot or the crew or anybody would have let that happen when you had a person on there to be forcibly removed that's not a security risk or whatever. So I'm glad to see that United's putting in the policy of the compensation. And that's where I think we solve the problem. I think overbooking, we've heard today, has its positives, and I think if also one big positive helps keep fares down for everybody. But when overbooking does happen, then we gotta let the market forces work. And I think the $10,000 deal, there'll be a stampede to get that gate person to take benefit of that. So they have another issue, but that'll be a positive issue, I think. But the cultural issue. You know, I think as leaders of your respected airlines, it's your job as leaders to improve the culture, because it's definitely a cultural issue. And instances, I fly basically weekly. You know, there's times we could be out in the tarmac because of weather or whatever and delays, and it's really nice when the pilot comes on and says, hey, we just heard from air traffic control, we're going to be delayed 20 or 30 minutes because issues here in D.C. or whatever. And there's been times when parked out in the tarmac and they say, you know, it's all right to, if you have to go to the restroom, use the restroom. You can turn on your phone and we'll tell you when to turn it back off, versus, you know, somebody standing over like a Gestapo, you can't do anything. And so that's just a whole cultural thing. But I'm really glad to see, I think, you know, the market has to function, has to work. My question I have, and I don't know the answer, do airlines still have reciprocity agreements or not?
At United Airlines, we have interline agreements to carry customers on most of our competing airlines, and in fact, certainly with American, with Delta, with our big competitive
I just want to make
airlines.
sure, because I know in years past, when I was flying, when issues come up, you go to the gate and they say, well, here, XYZ airline, we can get you on. So that still happens?
Yes,
Congressman, can I address that?
Yes.
Prior to deregulation in 1978, as I stated earlier, interline agreements, as they're called, were ubiquitous, so that basically the burden was on the airline, not on the passenger. So if airline A had any kind of a situation with overbooking, delay, cancellation, the passenger would be accommodated for the face value of the ticket at another carrier. Those interline agreements post-deregulation were sustained on the part of the airlines in some cases and not in others. And when there was an influx of low-cost carriers in the 1990s, major carriers started using interline agreements as a competitive tool at the expense of passengers by not interlining with startup and newer, smaller airlines. And now we have a situation where even some major airlines don't interline with each other. Now, their feuds are one thing, but the fact is this affects passengers in a very negative way.
Anybody else want to respond? Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Sprague.
Yeah, I would just say broad generalizations are one thing, but I think all major airlines have interline agreements with all other major airlines, and that's certainly the case with Alaska Airlines.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I think that's part of letting the market work, you know, some agreement. I think competitive pressures, we need competition, but when situations arise that's completely out of your control, weather or mechanical failure, you know, we need to put the customers first, and that's how you keep Congress off your back. I mean, put the customers first. Let's make sure that you're expounding a culture out there that puts the customers first, because that incident that happened, if the culture was right, it was coming from the top, that I don't believe that would have happened, because there would have been, you can't tell me there's not other paying customers on that flight that wouldn't have jumped at the chance for $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever to take a flight a couple hours later. I mean, it's just hard to believe that that's the case. And so I guess that's where my criticism is, that there's definitely a cultural problem. And I'm glad to see that in your written testimony, in your oral testimony, you're fixing to address that, because I think that's really where it starts. And I think that if all your team members understand that the customers come first and make it work the best, this is how we solve this problem and let the market forces work. So I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'm going to have to step out for a little bit, and I think I'll be back before this is over. But I just want to make sure that I say this, because I think it's so important that, you know, in every bad situation, there's a silver lining. We can usually find a silver lining. And if the airline industry doesn't find the silver lining in this, is to get together collectively and figure this out. Because if you don't, just like Mr. Gibbs said, like Mr. Capuano said, we're going to act. And if we act, it's going to be one size fits all. And it might be okay for United and American, but it's not going to be good for Alaska or JetBlue or whoever the case is. So, again, I'm pretty sure I'll be back, but I just want to make sure that should be the takeaway from today, is seize this opportunity, because if you don't, we're going to come, and you're not going to like it. So with that, I hand the gavel over to Mr. Duncan, and I recognize Ms. Napolitano for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that you mentioned is self-regulation, that you're going to ensure that you pay attention to it. But I would wonder whether it's going to be irregularly or inconsistent. How often will you review yourselves to be able to ensure that there are problems being addressed?
I think is a regular course, certainly at United, between ourselves internally to our board.
How often?
Our boards meet 5 times a year, so at least that many times. But internally into the open public, we have 86 million customers out there every day, and to everyone's concerns and thoughts, we hear from them very frequently with regards to this. And so I have a old saying from a long time ago that it's about proof, not promises. And so what you've seen from United in the 18 months I've been there anyway is everything we've said we were going to do, we've delivered upon. And so it'll be a constant stream of new announcements that enhance what we've already talked about, but also a follow-up on the issues. And again, with regards to the policies we put in place, everyone will be a judge in that. Yes.
To the rest of you.
Congresswoman, in the case of Alaska Airlines, we are constantly holding ourselves accountable from a customer service and a customer satisfaction standpoint, so much so that we actually have customer satisfaction metrics as part of our employee compensation, as part of our employee incentives, and those are watched very closely by all employees, all 19,000 of us, and those are addressed every single month.
Congresswoman, I would say the same thing for Southwest. Customer service measures are part of the way our, in particular, our leaders are compensated, so we review those often. And then second, with the change where we will no longer overbook as part of the oversell, and we expect that to go down, our denied boardings 80%. We will be watching that every single week.
We receive customer feedback in multiple forms, and we pay attention to all of it and take it all seriously. We have a team at American that we call our customer advocacy team that consists of senior leaders from every department around the airline, and we meet monthly to review feedback, review our policies, and make changes to continue to improve.
But are they implemented immediately?
They're implemented as quickly as we can. If it's a simple policy change, yes, immediately. If it's something that requires a technology change, it may take us a little longer to get it done.
Mr. McGee, do you have any comment?
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. We've heard a lot today about, again, retraining and improvements, and we certainly want to give credit where it's due for that. But I do think that there's an underlying issue here, and that is it really shouldn't take a media event and a viral social media, outcry to make executives in this industry rethink how they treat their customers.
Thank you. Mr. McGee, do you have any comment in the training that is afforded the employees insofar as mental health is included? Anything to help the employee deal with customers who are acting odd, or on the personal basis for self-improvement? I fly twice a week, so I've seen it all. Yet I've encountered every now and then a very rough attendant. Would it be because of stress? Would you indicate that any training is given to them to be able to deal with mental health problems if they arise?
I think it's an excellent question, Congresswoman, because, as I stated earlier, this is an industry that heavily outsources. I'm a former airline employee myself, so I should point that out. I'm an FAA-licensed aircraft dispatcher. I spent 7 years working in airline flight operations and ground operations management, and I was very proud to work at Pan Am, an airline that was renowned for passenger service. But right now, we have a situation where employees are under tremendous strain. I think it's the executive decisions that are putting flight attendants in the front lines of so many of these situations. Flight attendants have a primary responsibility to ensure safety and evacuation and things like that, and of course customer service, but we've asked them to be bouncers and police officers and all kinds of other things. Right. And so there's no question that there's an issue of training as well.
I'll ask any of you to quickly reply. I'm running out of time.
Simply put, we agree, and in fact, supporting United today in the audience is several of our pilots and flight attendants, and I think we work with them constantly to ensure that what their needs, what they see, and that constant back and forth, so that we do put in policies, training, and other things.
Does it include mental health training?
We do have a policy and a practice that we're implementing, particularly for our pilots.
Well, May is Mental Health Month, so I urge you to take a look at it and ensure that that is taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McGee, thank you for your comments that were just made about this industry hoping to fix some of the customer service problems themselves. Last You know, like many Americans, I was disturbed by the video we saw of Mr. Dow and also other videos subsequent to this. That's why I, along with my colleague, Mr. Lipinski, sent a letter to Secretary Chow asking for answers to questions about the incident, including maybe what specific guidelines, if any, the Department of Transportation provides to airlines in a situation where an airline asks seated passengers to exit a plane in order to accommodate a flight crew. Mr. Munoz, thank you for taking responsibility as the CEO for that disturbing video and making sure that there are policies now in place to ensure that doesn't happen again. That's the customer service solution that we here in this committee are looking for. I don't believe government can solve your problems. I don't believe this committee ought to solve any customer service problems. Frankly, that's something that you should do for your customers. And we are your customers. We fly a lot, so we interact with many of them at many different airports. And let me tell you, I personally witness better service in certain airports and worse service in others. And I think each of you ought to do a deep dive into where the customer service issues may be in your existing system, in your hubs, and also in the small regional airports. And also, if there are any issues with TSA, let us know so that we can help correct that situation too. Mr. Munoz, I had a question for you, but trust me, you would have answered it probably 10 times already today, so I'm not going to ask you that question. Although, a simple yes or no, do you also agree with me that United's better able to make customer service changes versus us?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Representing Central Illinois, when this happened, we knew we were going to have a hearing. I did what I like to do. I sent a survey out to my constituents. I actually have 29 pages of responses, over 2,000 responses to our survey. And overall, my constituents rated their customer services experience with the airlines as C. It's passing, average. On a positive note, the vast majority said that 73% of them said they did not feel as though they'd ever been mistreated by an airline employee. So that's good news. However, when asked if they felt the airlines were focused on good customer service, 60% said no. Mr. Jordan, one of the most consistent responses in our survey was an overall satisfaction with your airline. Did you hack my system?
I do not believe we hacked your system.
Thank you. Beverly from Glen Carbon said Southwest employees and flight attendants are friendly. Mary from Staunton, Southwest employees from start to finish are professional and friendly. Winona from Springfield said that Southwest really cares about their passengers. In all seriousness, is this a common trend on how customers feel about their experiences? Are you seeing that with your airline?
Congressman, yes, sir. Our NPS scores, or Net Promoter Score, which is really how we measure customer service, are very high. They're in the high 60s to 70 range. So they rank in kind of the Nordstrom, Google, Apple kind of NPS scores, and we find that across all airports. We find that across all parts of the customer experience journey. And I think that's due to not just changes that we've made, but it's due to the wonderful employees at Southwest Airlines.
You do have good employees. I fly your airline from DCA to St. Louis a lot, but I also fly American Airlines. That's the one I fly most. And I will tell you, an overwhelming majority of the time, every airline employee is very respectful, does their job extremely well, and provides great customer service. But it's just like in our business. Sometimes they don't remember the good service. Sometimes it's that incident that leads to all of you sitting in this hearing room today talking to us and answering questions. I tried working with many of the airlines to address a customer service problem that I saw and I've witnessed many times. It's parents flying with children, getting to the airport and being told that they're not sitting by their young children on the airplane before they even get there. And I asked many of your airlines, can you maybe devise a way to fix this? You didn't do it on your own. So I had to actually write language called the Families Flying Together Act that is part of the FAA reauthorization that would require anybody who's purchasing an advance ticket and a seat, and if they have young children, maybe there's a pop-up on that reservation that says, you know you're not sitting by your child. Because trusting the gate agent, the flight attendants to make that decision, is not providing the passengers the customer service that they deserve. And you know as well as I do that that's something that needs to be addressed. I was hoping we wouldn't have to address it here, but that's a shining example of when you don't act, we have to. And that's exactly what Chairman Schuster just said. Don't make us have to act and put a one-size-fits-all approach to fixing problems that we obviously see exist. They may be the exceptions. They may be, and we know they are because we see it. But in the end, those exceptions will bring a lot more rules from us if it's not addressed. So thank you.
Good comments. Mr. Lipinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just this morning, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics came out with a report that said in 2016, the passenger airlines recorded a profit of $13.5 billion. $4.2 billion of that was from baggage fees and $2.9 billion from change fees. And it's the 7th straight year of profit for the airlines. Now, I have nothing against profit. We do not want to go back to the days where all the airlines were failing because we need the airlines to be able to function. But I think it's important context, the position that the airlines are in right now financially. I want to commend United and Southwest for some of their policy changes that they have made in recent weeks. And I encourage the other airlines to follow suit with those changes and in others. But these changes are not enough to protect airline passengers. And I think, as Ranking Member DeFazio said, we need to prod, regulate, or legislate so that passengers are better protected. 16 years ago on the House floor, the then-ranking member of the Aviation Subcommittee, I think Mr. Duncan was chairman of that subcommittee at that time, he said when discussing airline mergers, if there are only 3 or 4 mega carriers serving the U.S. market, the federal government will once again have to regulate the airline industry. That was my predecessor, who is also my father, Bill Lipinski. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back to pre-1978 and go back to complete regulation, but perhaps there are some things that we may need to bring back. Mr. Gibbs raised the interlining issue. Mr. Kirby said that United does interline, but I want to read from United's contract of carriage. It states, upon United's sole discretion and the passenger's request. Meaning the passenger has to know this is in the contract of carriage and request it. And I actually think this is one of the better interlining statements about interlining, or one of the better things in the contract of carriage of any of the airlines. So maybe we have to go back to Rule 240 that said that an airline with a delayed or canceled flight has to transfer a passenger to another carrier if the second carrier could get the passengers to the destination more quickly than the original airline. And let me say this. I know that you will gouge each other in this type of situation, so maybe we put in there that some sort of restriction on how much one airline can charge another in that situation. But it seems to me, if we want to help passengers out and protect passengers, and this is not to go after the airlines, but if we want to protect passengers, to have these types of agreements require, perhaps, these types of agreements, that this is a way to make sure more people get to their destination at a closer time to when they were supposed to get there. Now, I want to open it up to each one. I don't have much time, so it'll be quickly. Is there a problem? Would this be a problem for you to do this? Let me start with United, whoever wants to answer.
I think we're an active user of interline agreements. I think we've used them less and less as we became more reliable. And I think an important note is to have those fees and that money to reinvest in our business so that we can improve reliability. And that's been the first trick. But with regards to interline alliances, we're strong believers.
How often do you use them? How often do passengers use them?
We use them a lot less than we used to because we don't need to. It's not a function of wanting to.
Would you be willing to make this more, change the contract of carriage where it doesn't say the passenger has to request it?
I'll leave that language discussion to someone that's more versed in it. I think the way we put it into practice is pretty customer-oriented, and we also don't gouge for our agreements with our fellow, like others.
That's good to hear.
Congressman, I think ultimately what you're suggesting is finding better ways for us to accommodate customers in these situations, and we agree with that. And as I said previously, we do maintain these agreements with other airlines.
Congressman, with the change to no overbooking, I expect the percentage of this happening to go down to 0.001%. So it's going to be a very small number of customers to need to be accommodated. We do not have official interline agreements. We have informal interline agreements at the airport. And a lot of times what we actually do is we empower our employees to actually buy tickets on other carriers to move our passengers to their destination.
Given the disruptions that are sometimes inevitable in the airline industry, service recovery is one of our top customer service priorities at American, and we're constantly working to improve the tools that we use, both behind the scenes and that are available to our employees, and self-service tools for our customers, to make sure that we provide customers with the best options to get them to their destination when they have disruption. And sometimes that does involve booking them on other carriers, and we'll continue to do that as well.
I don't want to regulate if we don't have to. I prefer not to, but I now know that I will ask every time. I have been told at times by Southwest, well, we don't have any interlining agreements. We can't put you on another airline. So I want to make sure people know, I will know, make sure people know to ask if this ever happens to them. And maybe that we can solve this problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Babin.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Babin from the state of Texas, and I was a small businessman, dentist for over 30 years. I know the importance of customer service and courtesy, running your business according to the golden rule, and know how significant it is if you have disgruntled customers. If you treat everybody like you'd want to be treated, I think this world would be a lot better place. Some of you may have already answered this question, because I'd like to address this customer service. Does your airline gather and analyze customer service data? And if not, why not? And if so, does your airline identify customer service issues and address customer dissatisfaction? I know Ms. Filipovich, excuse me, I think you said that Americans are already doing that, but I'd like to know, because I fly United most of the time into Houston, although I did fly Southwest, I do fly that occasionally. And I'd like to know what you guys do in terms of keeping data and customer service.
At United, we've actually pivoted from what used to be a very arduous survey that you received with 100,000 questions that took you forever, and we did that for a long period of time. And the fact of the matter was that simply the things that you kept telling us, we just kept telling us again. We weren't getting into fixing it. We've pivoted away from some of the more fancy measurements and just went to a simple survey that says that you like the flight. Yes or no? And if you didn't, why not? And we put pictures to make sure whether it's luggage or customer service. And the importance of that, it's clarity and specificity. And then more importantly, we take that data immediately as opposed to a week or a month later and provide it to, oh yeah, the people that actually run that airport so they can actually fix it. So that's the level of information we correct, but it's more about the action that supports it versus just gathering of data and your support.
Okay, now I'd like to ask Mr. Jordan. Same question.
Yes, sir. We measure every single day on every single flight the customer satisfaction around not just the flight, but every point in the journey. How was your buying experience, your boarding experience, your gate experience, your in-flight experience? And then we use that to provide feedback to constantly improve.
I appreciate that very much, and I'm going to run out of time, so I have some other things I'd like to address. In terms, we've talked about ticket change costs. Someone, I think the other side of the aisle, had mentioned the amazing differences in cost between changing a ticket. Some is either free, $15, and some of them $200 or $300. And I'm very disappointed in the differences between that, especially with some of the airlines that I fly most frequently. And I would hope that would be a more uniform cost to the passengers. As a former private pilot myself, used to love airplanes and love airports, but it's gotten to be a very onerous task since I fly about 6-7 hours a week. And I'd like to see a little more. I don't want to regulate. I'm a conservative Republican. I don't like regulation if we can get away with it, but something has got to be done in terms of customer service with some of you airlines. Also, frequent delays because of the lack of a gate agent. That's been another problem we've seen where your aircraft pulls up to the gate. You may be 10 minutes early or whatever. You have to sit there and wait on the tarmac for a gate employee to come out and hook you up. That seems to be a frequent problem that I've seen and also heard complaints. So what's going on there? You don't mind with United, since I fly you most of the time.
Well, thank you for the business, Congressman. At United, that is one of the things we're focused on is how we can run a more reliable operation, including turning aircraft. And one of the things we've recently started is measuring every single step in the process, including what you just described is a gate agent should be there to meet the airplane, not just the gate agent, but the ground crew as well. And that's one of the things that we're measuring and now have available to every one of our stations. And anytime we fail in that, we'll have data to be able to go back and figure out corrective actions or policy changes or staffing changes or anything that we need to address that.
Thank you very much. You know, the biggest concern, I guess, of any transportation service, and that goes for the airlines above all, get your passengers there safe. And I think all of you are doing a fantastic job there. But there's differences in between customer service and satisfaction, and I think airlines are at a low ebb right now in the public opinion, and some of you are doing quite a bit better job than others, and I would hope that would be standardized without any kind of regulatory reform and changes. So my time is up, Mr. Chairman, so I will yield back. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Babin. Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Munoz, you've apologized and made compensation for Dr. Dow. I appreciate that. It was awful to watch that. It reminded me of a Trump campaign rally. People shouldn't be treated that way. But the problem we've got is overbooking of airlines. And the reason we had the overbooking and having to take that man off the plane, or have somebody come off the plane, is because the airlines are beyond the realm in getting profits, higher salaries for executives, and less for customers. Part of that can be seen in the size of the seats that you have for the customers. Now, American and Delta are a tiny bit better than United on pitch. Spirit's the worst. I think Sky Blue is good, but probably Alaska's okay. It's been shown that passengers can get problems with their veins and thrombosis from long flights when they're so close together. Seats have gotten smaller, pitch has gotten less. Safety is a factor as well as comfort. Mr. Munoz, can you tell me what United has done, if anything, to try to have seats, size, and pitch that is safe for an evacuation of an airplane if an emergency should occur, which I believe is supposed to be 3 minutes to get everybody off?
If I could, Scott is our seat expert and has been doing this for quite some time. If I could yield to him.
If you could briefly give me the answer.
Yes, sir. Safety is our #1 priority, as is at all of the competing airlines here today. And we test all of our aircraft for evacuation in the case of emergency, and that's done under the guise of the FAA. And so all of our aircraft, not just at United Airlines, but at every airline in the country is...
And can you get everybody off in 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
And has the diminution in pitch and width not made it more difficult?
Sir, we still meet those standards, and...
Do you have a film of that which my staff and I can view?
We actually do have films of that.
Great. If you would let Mr. Fulton know, I'd love to see it because I find it hard to fathom with those seats. Particularly, Ms. Filipovich, Americans become the #1 carrier in Memphis. We thank you for filling the void that Delta left after Mr. Anderson testified before this committee that Cincinnati and Memphis would not be hurt. There would still be hubs and there wouldn't be any changes with the merger. So Americans come in and filled up that. But yesterday I flew on Air Wisconsin, and that's the worst seat I've ever had in my life. I've been there before. I refused it. I made a mistake. I'm going to start coming earlier and getting the Embraer. which is a good plane. The Air Wisconsin planes are, buses with propellers. Why do you use Air Wisconsin and put passengers in those teeny tiny awful seats with probably the worst pitch, worse than Spirit, and the worst width? Why do you use those?
Well, first of all, thank you for your business in Memphis. We're glad to be able to welcome you on board. We work with regional partners to allow us to have different size aircraft so we can serve small and medium-sized communities across the country, and we're really proud to do that. We know that we need to work to standardize the products and services because when a passenger buys a ticket on American Airlines, they expect American Airlines level of service.
That's what I expected. I thought I was going to get an Embraer, and instead I got on, Air 1941. It was like a civil rights bus from the 60s that had been preserved and had propellers put on it.
Well, I apologize that you had an uncomfortable flight, and please know that we're working to improve and standardize the experience that our customers have, regardless of who operates the flight when they buy an American ticket.
Thank you. Mr. McGee, do you believe that the pitch and the width have hurt customer safety as well as maybe imperiled diminished comfort?
Yes, absolutely. It's not just a comfort and value issue. It's a safety issue in terms of evacuation. It's a health issue, as you noted, in terms of DVT. Consumers Union has researched this and advocated about it and written about it. And we found when we reached out to the Federal Aviation Administration that there are unanswered questions when the FAA conducts its evacuation drills, that they're outdated in many cases. Because they don't reflect real-world load factors, which now are often at 100%. They're at less than 100%. B, they're often with employees and things like that, so they're people that know how to evacuate a plane. And the third reason is that they often don't reflect accurate real-world seat pitch, as you've pointed out. So there are unanswered questions there about the most primary issue of all, which is safety.
Thank you, sir. My time's expired, but to the airlines, think Memphis. We need more flights.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of discussion today in regards to the competition and regulation of the industry. And I myself prefer a free enterprise system, prefer to keep government out of the way whenever we can possibly do that. But I think the real question for us today is whether additional regulation will be needed, whether there is enough competition to prevent that. And I think, Mr. Munoz, you said it best. You said the best way to avoid the need for that is for the industry to do self-regulation. And I think what we're looking for is to be able to have the confidence that the industry will provide the customer service that our constituents deserve without the federal government stepping in. So we had a horrific incident, unthinkable to see what we saw, the images that we saw in those videos. And I think our job is to determine whether this is a one-time incident or whether it is indicative of a culture that could lead to additional incidents like this. And I believe in many ways that the top of the organization, the CEO, sets the tone. As a small business owner, we admittedly much smaller, only had a few hundred employees, but the tone of the CEO is absolutely critical to drive the customer service throughout the organization. Mr. Munoz, you asked us to trust you today to make the changes that will be needed here for United. I must tell you, if I'm a member of the general public, seeing your reaction, seeing the reaction of United initially and in the few weeks after the incident, there's a lot of work to be done to convince us that you are responding properly to this horrific event. The day after the incident, and I'll quote, you said, "I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers." And then later that evening you said to your employees, "While I deeply regret this situation arose, I also emphatically stand behind all of you, and I want to commend you for continuing to go above and beyond." Mr. Munoz, could you tell us what you were thinking at that point?
Yes, sir. With regards to the initial response, I think there's no excuse. It was an act based upon me trying to understand facts and circumstances. It's on me. It was the wrong thing to say at the wrong time. The second comment, after we gathered more facts and we understood a little bit more of the facts and circumstances, what had caused the event, who had been involved in the physicality that you saw, it was my point to make sure that our 87,000 employees understood that we had good...
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I only have 5 minutes. I was appalled at your comments the first day. Sent a letter the morning of the next day, April 11th, which, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit into the record if I could do so.
Without objection.
There were simple questions in regards to policy that had led to this, in regards to what United was doing to change that policy. Mr. Munoz, it took you 2 weeks to respond to that letter. The response did not fully address the questions. You did send a review and action report. I was amazed that report did not even mention that your passenger was physically harmed. I think that is an important part of the investigation. It's not mentioned in your report. Would you care to respond to that?
Sir, we preferred, given the video was indeed so visible to so many people, to just stay with the basic facts of the situation and not further sort of elaborate on those things. And again, the document, as we've laid out, was in fact to get as much information as out there as possible quickly.
I have 46 seconds. You do, I commend you for some of the changes that you are making in regards to policy for your employees. I'm very disappointed that you're not changing, or at least not mentioning a change to the policy of how you would select a passenger for removal. That's unbelievable to me that after that has occurred, you would not take, for instance, the very last passenger that shows up at the date rather than some other algorithm to choose an employee. So I'm very disappointed about your response in that regard.
Thank you. The situation is a difficult one because if someone arrives late because they were delivering a baby or something, it's a difficult choice. Our policy, our practice, our go-forward sort of situation would be as much as possible to ameliorate the possibility of those actual events happening, and in regards to reducing our overbooking, making sure crews don't get there on time, and most importantly, once you're on board one of our aircraft, you will not be removed, and certainly law enforcement will not be allowed other than for safety or security. So I think we've covered most of those issues, and of course, we'll offer incentives and financial remuneration along with alternative solutions to get to your destination. So it's a start, sir, and I think we'll move forward. You'll see us do that, and I hope I do earn your trust.
Thank you. I'm out of time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Series.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, the optics of what happened are awful for your industry. And I know you're uncomfortable sitting before us, but you know what's more uncomfortable? When you have friends that travel your airline and they have a lousy flight, you jerk them around, you send them, they miss the flight, and then they call you up. You say, what are you going to do about it? These are lifelong friends. And last summer, I have friends of mine that travel to Europe out of Newark, which I represent part of it. And 9:30, they were supposed to take off. 1:30, they canceled the flights, put them in a hotel, no luggage. Next day, you send them to the wrong city. They had to get a van to go and travel to meet the schedule that they had in Europe. Now, I had to listen to all that from my friend. What are you going to do about it? My question to you is, are you too big to manage your industry? Have you grown so big that you can manage? I mean, you're moving 186 million customers a day. Do you consider yourself too big to manage? Because I was listening to the former Virgin Air, Richard Branson, and one of the things that he suggested is that this industry is getting out of control, just getting too big to manage.
I think the value of the large footprint that we and other airlines on this table have is the ability to really connect customers to all parts of the world through our various network. The large
But you
scale
can do that with smaller airlines and still,
Yeah,
not just one big, humongous airline.
with all due respect, sir, it's a little bit more difficult than that. The handoffs that we do have today can be difficult and are continuing another concern that we have of ours. But I think the large scale certainly provides and allows for some more freedom of choice, but also the complexity is something that we have to better manage. We are an organization that, and around policies and procedures on safety that work very well, but again, to your point, it's important that we localize that customer service, not in a broad perspective. And every one of our stations, every one of our folks are very keen and focused on that.
Mr. Kirby, I assume you're responsible for the size of the seats in your airline?
I can certainly answer questions about
Well, you know, I would tell you to consider that people are getting larger in America, and the idea of making the seats smaller is not safe.
Well, sir,
You may take that 3 minutes. I don't think I can make it out of a plane in 3 minutes.
Safety is our number one concern at United Airlines, and we're focused on safety. As to seat size, we are trying to offer our customers more choice, and
well, that brings me to another question. Every time you want to do something, you got to pay extra. I mean, if you want a window with an aisle, you got to pay extra. If you want a little extra seat in the front, you want extra.
Yes,
I
sir.
know you're saying that it's, you know, that has to do with the price of the ticket and everything else, but pretty soon you're going to charge to use the restrooms.
Sir, we're never going to do that, but it does have to
You're
do.
not going to do that,
We're not going to do that, but it does have to do with the price of the ticket. It costs the same to fly an airplane whether you have 150 seats or 138 seats on board, essentially the same. And if you take 12 seats off to create more room on the airplane, you're going to have to charge more.
If you take up more room. Mr. McGee, can you respond to that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Congressman, today we've heard an awful lot about pricing, and we hear this sort of charge over and over again that prices are lower than ever when adjusted for inflation. We've heard it several times today. The fact is that that obscures several key things. One, of course, is the fees, as you pointed out. Years ago, we didn't pay to sit by a window. We didn't pay to bring a bag on, et cetera.
Do we have any idea how many fees the companies charge?
We see that every day they are not only higher and higher fees, but new fees. And now, for the first time, admittedly,
The airlines are making money. It's not as if
no question about that. There's no question they're making money. There's no question that that the price of fuel has gone down. So you have apples to apples, oranges comparisons there. But in addition, even just within a given route, the fluctuation in fares is so great. We have seen time and time again, the DOT puts out a quarterly airfare report 4 times a year that shows where there's competition from low-cost carriers, from Spirit, from JetBlue, et cetera, fares go down. In fact, it was even, as Mr. Jordan well knows, the DOT called it the Southwest effect to address this back in the 1990s. When there is no low-fare competition and the majors are competing with each other or not competing with anyone effectively in many markets, fares, the disproportion, when we talk about average fares, the disproportionate rate between the lowest and the highest is so great that passengers all over the country are getting gouged. There is no competition. If you would allow, if I had a moment, I can just tell you, this is on a low-cost carrier, mind you, coming here yesterday. I received the invitation last Wednesday. And flying from Connecticut, where I live, I went on last Tuesday night at midnight, 43 minutes after midnight. I found a fare of $398.40. Unfortunately, my credit card had a problem, which we don't need to get into today, but I'm a consumer advocate, not an airline executive. I went back on 7 hours and 36 minutes later. That price was now $648.40 on a low-cost carrier. That's $250. That's a 61% increase in 7 hours and 36 minutes. There aren't too many businesses that charge such a wide variance in price for the exact same product. Luckily, my credit card worked the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry it took so long.
Thank you, Mr. Sam Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've certainly heard a lot today about everything that's gone wrong, and I'm going to give you the opportunity. We'll start with Mr. Munoz. So what's going right?
Sir, thank you for asking that question. What's going right, at least from a United perspective, that over the last 18 months, our operational reliability has improved to a degree that in this month we're finishing first in the 4 publicly reported metrics. So I've learned over the course of my time when it comes to customer service and customer needs, there are 3 basic things that people want. First and foremost, despite what they say about all of the other important items like food and seats, reliability is the most important one. Get me where the heck I asked to get you. And so we've been investing in our people, our business, and our resources to ensure that reliability is improved, and that's improved mightily. Second, it's an issue of concern with customers is flexibility. We're almost a 100-year-old company. Safety is a main driver for us, and safety is so important that the rigorous application of policies and procedures is a discipline that has carried over into our customer service area. That's where we have to make the changes. That's been our next sort of approach. And then lastly, with regards to information, if something's going wrong, tell me the hell it's going wrong, and tell me as quickly as I can so you don't sort of upset my timing and schedules. So that's what we've been working on, those things, and the incident a few weeks ago was a horrible incident that we're never going to repeat, but the trajectory of our company in that regard has been doing very well.
Mr. Sprague.
Congressman, thank you for the question. I think I would lead with, at Alaska Airlines, our employee morale is high, and they are very focused on doing a good job for the customers, and they're working very hard in that regard. I had a bit of a complaint when I flew out here yesterday on Alaska Airlines. The in-flight Wi-Fi was slower than I would have liked. And yet, when we think about it, it wasn't that long ago that the notion of being able to do your email on board a flight at 30,000 feet would have been unheard of. And yet, we're taking that on as an opportunity to do even better, and we'll be installing satellite Wi-Fi across our fleet so that we can improve that part of our customer experience. I think that's an example of, to answer your question very directly, one of the things that's going right in the industry is the innovation. Airlines are investing in their product, and they're doing it with innovative new approaches to technology and service to make the customer experience as good as it can be.
Mr. Jordan.
I think, I'm speaking for Southwest, so many things are going right, particularly on the customer service side. The NPS scores, how we measure service, are the best that they have been in the last 3 years. They're 11 points higher. OTP is 7 points higher than 2 years ago. The mishandled bag rates are the lowest they have ever been in the history of our company. The complaint ratios, even though we enplain 12% more customers than 3 years ago, they are nominally lower today. So I think a lot is going very well on the customer service side. And just briefly, you mentioned seats. We are in the middle of retrofitting quite a bit of the fleet with a new seat, and that seat is actually wider and with better effective pitch. So the sort of personal room for the customer is actually getting better. So I think there are a number of things that are going better for the customer in terms of customer experience.
Ms. Filipovich.
Thank you for the opportunity, Congressman. It's a time of great optimism at American Airlines, and just in the past 3 years, we've added more than 10,000 new team members to our American family. We've increased our team members' compensation by an average of more than 35%. We've added 100 new routes, and our team members have delivered amazing results, improving our reliability, and we've seen customer satisfaction scores going up. And this is all at a time where we're making unprecedented investments in our product and our customer experience. So we're really excited about what the future holds.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. Ms. Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I represent Las Vegas. Now, this is a place that knows a thing or two about customer satisfaction and hospitality and service. We welcome over 43 million visitors to my district every year, and many of them come through McCarran Airport, which is also in my district. Now, I've often heard my friend Jim Murin, who is the head of MGM Resorts International, say that people talk about their experience from the moment they leave their home all the way through the trip to the time they check into his hotel, and that leaves a lasting impression on them about the quality of the visit they have. Now, he doesn't want to have to buy breakfast for some angry customer like Mr. Capuano here when they get there because they've lost their bag, or they had to wait for an hour to get a cab, or they had an unpleasant flight experience. And I'm sure you don't want to deal with that same kind of customer either. But it's no wonder that they exist. We've heard all these stories about ticketing systems crashing that leave passengers stranded, long lines passing through security, baggage fees that push customers to take their suitcases on board, and despite the fact that you say one goes up and one goes down, they're cramming them all up there, bumping into people while they do it. Add that to the xenophobic policies of the administration, who are doing this extreme vetting and checking your Facebook or email or whatever when you get on the plane, it's no wonder that people come kind of girded for battle. So I have some sympathy for what you're having to deal with. But this is my question. We've heard all this kind of ranting about how bad the airlines are and all these unfortunate experiences, and yet pretty soon this committee is set to consider a proposal to privatize air traffic control and hand over billions of dollars worth of investment and assets to a private corporation that's going to be controlled by y'all, by the airlines. And then you'll be able to run it as you see fit. Now, I'm opposed to that for a number of reasons, primarily because of how it's going to leave customers kind of in the lurch. But my question is, what do you have to show that means you're going to be able to take over this corporation and do well by your customers from that angle any better than you do from your angle that you are now? For example, there are questions like, how much is the traveler going to have to pay to this corporation? What kind of things have you done at your airlines that in terms of routing that might be better that you'll do through this corporation? In terms of investment in technology, management decisions, what have you done about your own scheduling? All of those questions that have seemed to be criticized today, how are they going to translate into your being able to control air traffic control system through a private board? So maybe y'all could just tell me some of the things you're doing that would make an argument for why you should control that aspect of airlines as well.
Well, thank you for the question, Congressman. And we believe that one of the ways we can actually help our customers is through ATC privatization. The worst thing we do to our customers is the long delays and cancellations. And those lead to customer service problems. They lead to the customer that gets to McCarran and is upset. And we want to fix that. And the FAA is a fantastic partner, and they want to fix that as well. But they're handicapped today by the model where they do annual budgets, where investing for the future and the kinds of investments we need to make for the future are hard for the FAA to do in the normal course of business in the government. And the kinds of things that we could do to make the process better is, for example, you have more sophisticated GPS technology in your car than we use on aircraft today. We have these systems, and we could fly straight line routes, but we still fly zigzag highways in the sky to get from Washington to Las Vegas. We could do things like continuous descent approaches. So today, we're at 35,000 feet. We step down in each one. It's like driving your car and slamming on the accelerator and then hitting the brake and slamming on the accelerator, and we burn gas and we take more time. All of that could allow us to fly shorter paths and get our customers there quicker. And we believe that's one of the best things we could do for customer service is to reform the ATC program. And one of the best ways to do that is FAA privatization, not because the FAA is doing a bad job. They do a wonderful job. But the process is designed to be difficult and particularly for making long-term investments.
And what guarantee does a customer have you'll do any better job at that than you're doing now with just getting them on the plane or dragging them off?
Well, while we do have bad incidents like what happened 3 weeks ago on United Airlines, we are carrying 86 million people safely this year. As all of us talked about in the last question, we're getting better at running reliable operations. And in this case, we have the exact same incentive. What's better for our customers is better for the whole air traffic system. It's better for our economy. And we have the same set of incentives. If we can fly more efficiently, that's good for our customers to get them there faster. But it's also good for fuel burn.
I'm sorry, we have to take a 5-minute recess at this time. We'll be in recess exactly 5 minutes. go ahead and start back. If everyone will please take their seats. And the next member to ask questions is Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not want to go down the road here in my 5 minutes of telling you how to run your business. We get far too much of that from Capitol Hill, it seems to me. And you know more about running your business than probably most of us here. I do want to come to you, though, as a consumer who just spent 2 weekends ago 30 hours getting from Washington, D.C. to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I and another colleague were stranded at Reagan for a day and a half without, frankly, adequate communication from an airline. We had our flights delayed for 2 days, delayed for an hour, delayed for an hour, delayed for an hour, then at the end of the day canceled. Would have been much easier had the flight been canceled right from the get-go. This was due to the weather disturbance in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. So, as I say, I understand the constraints with which you run your industry, and it's got to be somewhat gratifying, given the good financial health you appear to be in, to prove Warren Buffett wrong. That's a good thing. When the guy that said the industry was a death trap for investors is now investing in the airlines, I think that's a good thing, a lot better than bankrupt airlines. So I want to make certain that we can arrive at some solutions potentially today to make the flying experience better for people like me and my constituents and everybody across the country, while also maintaining profitability and operating at full capacity, which has been the goal for quite some time. There's no other way to run the business. You can go back to pre-1978, but in those days, of course, travel by air was reserved for upper middle income. Today, it's every man's way to travel. So, having said all of this, and I don't want to focus on, well, let me start with this, and I'll open it up with Mr. Munez, and that is, there's been a lot of talk about air traffic control reform. And since we are operating at full capacity, which is the best way for the airline to remain profitable, would air traffic control reform have an effect on the flying experience? For instance, my situation, when you've got capacity so constrained and there's one hiccup, whether it's weather or whether it's crew or whether it's anything, you're going to have a ripple effect. Would reforming ATC have an effect, and what kind of an effect?
It's an incredibly outdated system, as you may well guess, which led to some of those events. We think it had a lot of improvement. Mr. Kirby just answered a question a few minutes ago. I would ask him to, just for continuity purposes, invite him to answer as well.
Yeah. It would lead to dramatic improvement, we believe, over time for customers. We'd be able to fly faster and get to the destination faster, which does put more slack and more capacity into the system. It probably wouldn't have, given what happened at a different airline for that weekend, it probably wouldn't have had much effect on that, but it would lead to overall improvement for customers because we could spend less time with the airplanes in the air and parked on the ground and more time getting the customers there quickly.
If it increases capacity, would you then just, supply and demand tend to meet, would you just increase loads again then?
Well, it's likely that we would increase flying at that point over time, and that I think would be really good for customers as we increase flying. Fares, supply and demand on that side. As supply tends to go up, fares tend to come down, and we could carry even more customers every year.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan, Southwest came out of the airline deregulation, great success story. There's one thing you do that a number of the other airlines operating on the a la carte system don't do, and that is you put the bags within the ticket price. It seems to me, again, there's been a lot of talk about stress from this panel today flying, and one of the stressors seems to be, in some cases, it takes longer to board the plane and deplane than it does to get to my destination once we're in the air. And some critics suggest that's because we have separated, or the excise tax doesn't apply to baggage when you separate it out, when you go a la carte. You haven't gone down that road. Are the critics right? Is there a problem with boarding? I know we've got zones now, and they're trying, and executives are trying to figure out the best way to board, the best way to deplane. But it does seem to be a problem when you're behind the person that's trying to put their hope chest in the overhead bins.
Thank you for the question. Just generally, we think what is the best for the customer, just doing what's right for the customer, is to let them take a bags for free, not charge change fees, not charge cancellation fees, et cetera, et cetera. On the operational side, yes, if a customer can check a bag for free, they're going to check more bags, which that results in a smaller number of bags that are brought on board because they can check, which allows us to board more efficiently and allows for the overhead bins to be less crowded.
I see my time is up, but I'd like to continue this at a later date, I hope. Thank you all for coming. It takes a lot of courage to show up here given the recent events, and we appreciate it. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Esty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the endurance of the panel. But our constituents have to endure, and that's why we're here. You're not just in the transportation business, you're in the customer service business. And we've seen some rather noteworthy and disturbing failures in the last few weeks. With the bad weather a couple of weeks ago, I had many calls in my office and people who see me on the airline every week talking about how they've been stranded. I had to help a passenger who was in a wheelchair who was left for 3 hours just sort of abandoned at a gate, and nobody was keeping track of her, letting her know what was going on, checking to see could she get to the bathroom, could she have any help. And that on customer service, frankly, no low ticket price makes up for a miserable experience. With the consolidations that we're seeing, with 4 of the airlines controlling 85% of the traffic. When I fly from Hartford, Connecticut, I don't have a lot of choices. And that's true for my colleagues, and it is more importantly true for our constituents. They have very little choice. You're in a near monopoly position. And I think that's why so many of us are concerned, and you're hearing this linkage to FAA privatization. If the market were functioning well, this could never have happened, Mr. Munoz, never have happened. And we know well that that was a shocking and thankfully rare event. We don't want to see violence on airlines. But unless we figure out a way to guarantee that customers are coming first, you're going to see more of that. My colleague, Richard Blumenthal, is introducing legislation in the Senate today to deal with raising what those required offer prices are, putting in new standards. And I know there's been well-drafted, and hats off to the PR folks who helped you draft the response belatedly. But you can understand why we're skeptical that the market is going to solve it, because it should have prevented this from happening. And so genuinely, what kind of assurance can we have that there shouldn't be legislation in place, that I don't have constituents telling me about having been diverted to Dulles because of snow and left on the tarmac for 4 hours, standing in sight of stairs, and they just sat there with no update for 4 hours. Now, I understand there are snowstorms, but why couldn't someone roll stairs over? I was getting calls from the plane to my office saying, can't you do something? We can see the stairs. No one will tell us what's happening. Then they started to run out of fuel. That bespeaks a focus on the bottom line and having lost the customer. If the customer is really king or queen, you've forgotten that. So how do we fix this? How do we fix this other than folks here having to draft legislation for you to treat our constituents with the respect and safety that they deserve on the airlines, with the consolidation that's happened, because I think it's really important. We talk about the importance of customers being able to vote with their dollars. My constituents don't have that choice. When I'm looking at flights, I don't have that choice. If I need to go to be here in time for votes, I don't have that choice. I don't have that. And I can no longer take like a 3 o'clock flight and think I'm going to get here in time. I have to back it up because I can't count on that. And the lost productivity is billions and billions and billions of dollars of Americans right now who face the same choice that our colleagues all face and saying, well, I guess I got to take that really early flight, make sure I get there in time. I might get bumped. How are we going to fix this? What are you going to do? Not a press release, but what are you going to do in changing your policies? Among them, can I suggest, I never want to see a paying customer pulled off of a flight to move a crew. You charter a plane if you need to do it. But that should never happen. You need to move your crews. I get that. We all get that. but it should never be at the expense of a paying customer, ever. And that's going to be the first thing, on a bill I'm signing on to, because that is the ultimate indication that you have not managed your system well, and you are asking customers to pay for your failure to manage. So genuinely, please come to the table with us and figure out how we're going to set standards in place and ability to hold you accountable. And again, I know none of you want to be here. Frankly, we don't want to be here either. We want our constituents to be happy. We want them to get there safely and get home safely on time, and we do too. But it's got to be more than press releases. It actually has to be change in policies and practices, and most importantly, priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. LaMalfa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panelists, for being here today and enduring this. Indeed, we have a lot of controversy about air travel recently and over the years. I think a great point was made about the sitting on a tarmac in a plane for several hours. I hope that can be something that could have a lot more attention to that in the future. I think some changes have been made, but to be sitting in an airplane waiting for an undetermined outcome, I would hope they could find ways to allow people at least deplane during an unknown delay like that. But I'm a frequent flyer too. I fly from the West Coast to the East Coast. It's about a 5-hour on average flight, and so by and large it goes pretty well. I mean, we note that there's 700 million customers that fly successfully every year, and I think that's pretty remarkable. We have a very tiny percentage that do have indeed some of the problems that are being talked about here, but what we also know about flying 35,000 feet or so in the air, you have zero margin for error, okay? Not like a land-based vehicle where you can just pull over. You don't just pull over in a plane. I mean, your options are a little more limited. So you have a lot of things you go through to ensure safety. Before you take off, we've all sat there when they're reprogramming the computer, something doesn't quite go right, they have a mechanical issue they got to look at, because, I'd rather they do than they don't. You also have constraints from competition to keep your planes full. I use a major airline in my travel. In the first 3 months of each year, my direct flight isn't available because I don't think the airline can keep the seats full. Therefore, I don't want to lose the flight completely having a direct, so I have to hop through Denver or Chicago or something like that for the first 3 months of the year until the tourist season comes in. So we all get there's economic restraints, and that's important. And as a business person, I get that too. So I guess what it gets down to, though, is that we did have this recent incident here, and legislators, when they read something in the newspaper, they want to legislate, and you all are taking your beating here in the committee here today, and United especially. And what I have seen United do is take steps, take remedies towards that. And so my quick question down the whole panel is that, and I think I understood, I'm sorry I've been in and out of the hearing a little bit for a competing hearing. Mr. Munoz, you did mention that you no longer have a policy of pulling somebody off the airplane where you did before, right? That was already seated.
That is correct.
That's abolished. Okay, for the rest of the airlines, would you just quickly on that, did you ever have that, or have you since abolished since this issue?
We've recommitted that we will never remove a seated passenger to accommodate another passenger.
Okay, thank you.
And for Southwest, same thing. It's our intent to never involuntarily deny somebody who has already boarded onto the aircraft.
I'm not aware of us having done it at Alaska Airlines, and same, it is our intent to avoid that situation altogether.
Okay, all right. So I think a very big lesson learned very graphically on Twitter and video and everything else. So I don't always think that there's a legislative remedy from people that aren't in business that deal with it day in, day out. So I'm not quick to think that legislation is needed from Washington, D.C. on this issue. I think let's give the airlines a chance to carry that out. I did go through the United Carriage of Contract over the weekend. I had a really slow moment there. And I didn't see in Rule 25 denied boarding anything about pulling people off the airplane. Was there ever anything in print about pulling them off the aircraft? I mean,
No, sir, that's an internal policy.
okay, all right. So that appears to be in the past. So I think that what we also do is we can learn from other people on how they do things. So some of the major airlines versus some of the not quite as big airlines. So what would Alaska Airlines, for example, be able to impart to United or to Southwest, and what could Alaska Airlines learn from United or Southwest or American, the bigger ones versus the more mid-sized ones? What would you be able to share with each other on how you would do things? Let Alaska go first, Mr. Sprague. What is it you would advise, and what would you like to learn from them as a way to do better?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question, and I will be a little cautious with my answer because this is an industry that has an ability to humble an airline and its employees in a hurry. There's a number of things at Alaska Airlines that even with some of the customer accolades we've received that we need to improve on, and we know that and we're focused on that. I think that one thing we have found is that giving our employees, our customer-facing employees that deal with our guests every day, as much empowerment as possible. We have a stated company value to do the right thing, and we believe that if we empower our employees and we talk to them about empathy and the golden rule, that they will do the right thing, and that usually leads to the best outcome for all involved.
I appreciate that. I'll yield back in a second. And also, I had a very good experience watching a lady at the counter with the Southwest one in Baltimore during the delay. She handled things like a pro, but also she was assertive enough with obnoxious customers to be able to get the job done for the rest of us. So there's a very talented line that has to be there with that. And also, Alaska, I like your tail logo the best. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Frankel.
Thank you, sir. I want to first thank the panel. You know what? You probably feel today like a lot of flyers, very claustrophobic and waiting for something bad to maybe happen. So thank you for your patience. And my colleagues have done a very good job, I think, in pointing out some problems. And I'm not going to pile on. I want to start by thanking the thousands of professional flight attendants and pilots and the counter people that work in this industry who do very good jobs and work very hard. And I think what we all can agree that policies and training make a difference so that they can do their job. So does having a good civil justice system so people can have private recourse, and it doesn't hurt to have a good cell camera when you need one, right? I'm from Florida, South Florida. We had 100 million visitors last year. Many of them took planes. The airline industry creates $1.3 million jobs with a $44.5 million payroll in our state. So we have to get this right. I have 3 questions, and just so that you can answer them, maybe if one of you would try to answer each of these questions. I don't need all of you to answer them, okay? First of all, I'd like to know whether the consumer union folks ever meet with you all and you could sit down and discuss these issues. Number 2, we've talked a lot about overbooking. I'd like to understand what might be the unintended consequences, if any, and how it would affect especially customers if we did not allow overbooking. And then I think a policy that I know really irritates most of us is the rigid change policies, how expensive it is. And I don't understand why in this digital age they have to be so rigid. So if you want to take a shot at those 3 questions.
I think United will take the overbooking one since we've been answering, and Scott's been doing this, so I'll let him do it.
Well, first, Congresswoman, thank you for thanking our employees who, you're right, do a phenomenal job in tough conditions all the time. On overbooking, we use overbooking to take care of thousands of customers that we would otherwise not be able to accommodate. One of the most common uses is in a situation where someone has a delayed or canceled flight, and we will then overbook them, those customers, onto another flight that's currently booked full.
May I just say something? What is the number of people who are bumped compared to the number of people who are accommodated because of the overbooking?
So most of our oversales where we can't accommodate customers come from operational issues like a weather issue where we can't take a full load of passengers. We at United, about 15% of the time when we actually overbook a flight, do we actually have more customers show up than are on the airplane. And in that situation, 95.6% of the time, we are able to solicit volunteers. So it's really unusual that overbooking creates an involuntary denied boarding, and particularly now that we've gone up to a $10,000 limit on denied boardings, I think we're going to be able to drive that number close to zero. But if we stopped overbooking entirely, there are thousands of customers that we either couldn't sell a ticket to, or that when there is an operational disruption, we couldn't give them another option for how to get home.
Next question.
I can take your question about consumer unions. As you know, the Department of Transportation has a robust consumer protection division that oversees airline issues. They also host a panel with both consumer union members and airlines to get together to discuss issues. So that's a good way that we are able to connect.
Congresswoman, can I add something to that?
Yeah. But I want to get to the rigid change policy, if somebody could. Yeah.
Just a quick aside on the issue of, that's come up several times, legislation versus self-policing. It should be noted that during the tarmac delay discussions that were so robust a few years ago, I participated on behalf of Consumers Union at a meeting organized by Senator Boxer, and every airline in the United States was invited, as well as the largest airline trade organization, and not one representative showed up. For me, that was a turning point for Consumers Union. They were invited to discuss a serious consumer issue, and they didn't even come. The chairman today noted that some of the airlines that were invited to this hearing didn't come. So I think that speaks volumes.
And on the rigid change policy.
I can take that question. I had answered it earlier as well. Airlines offer a variety of products to meet differing needs of consumers, and some consumers put a priority on buying the lowest fare and are willing to buy a restricted ticket in order to get that fare, while other customers know they need more flexibility and they prefer to buy a non-refundable fare. So the change fee is something that is basically a way to offer some measure of flexibility. When people buy a non-refundable ticket, with a change fee, we do allow some flexibility there. So that's the purpose of change fees.
Thank you, and I yield.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know you're having a bad day when the group that's going to lecture you on customer satisfaction is the United States Congress. Right? That's a low bar to get over. I just want to see a show of hands. When somebody gets stuck for 3 hours in the snow in Dulles Airport, whose airline makes more money because those passengers are trapped out there on the runway? Nobody does? Well, let me ask a different question then. When the stairs fail to get rolled over to my plane so I can climb down, which one of you has operational control over that airport and is preventing those stairs from getting rolled over to my plane? None of you do? Well, let me just ask the other question then. Who is it that's controlling the airspace there on that runway that's not letting planes come and go? Is it the profit-seeking airlines, or is it the consumer-friendly federal government that is controlling those airways? Can someone help me with that? I know the answer to this question, and I just cannot believe that we've been sitting in this hearing again as if we have the customer satisfaction approval ratings to do it, talking about how if only the government were to regulate more, we would do better. The $1,350 maximum bumped passenger fee that is in DOT regs today, I'm sure folks intended that to be a floor, but it is in fact a ceiling that developed in the industry. If you can't roll the stairs to your plane, if you can't take off just because you want to take off, I want to understand if we're in the safest aviation environment we've ever been in. As we go back historically, have we been in a safer aviation environment historically? No. Well, as we go back, have we been in a more affordable air travel environment ever in our nation's history? So we're the safest we've ever been, we're the cheapest we've ever been, and we want to figure out how to
do better for consumers, and we're thinking it might be more federal regulation that will do it. Now, I did a quick back-of-the-envelope count on how many flights take me back and forth to Georgia each and every day, and Atlanta is a different case. And I understand that we have Spirit going back and forth, we have Southwest going back and forth, American takes us direct, Delta's going back and forth. We don't have any shortage. About 36 flights a day take folks back and forth from Atlanta to the region, and competition sorts out the issues. Does anyone's airplane model allow me not to purchase a bigger seat if I'd like one? Has anybody eliminated the larger, more comfortable seats from the model? Nope, nobody on this panel has done that. So we haven't eliminated the larger, more comfortable seats. Whose model has added smaller, cheaper seats? Has American added smaller, cheaper seats in the last 10 years?
We've changed density on aircraft in some cases where we've added seats, but we haven't changed the size of the seats.
All right. Has Southwest added smaller, cheaper seats?
We have moved to a new seat, but it's actually wider and more effective pitch.
I just can't understand who it is on this panel that believes we care more about your customers than you do. I'll ask my friends from United. Mr. Kirby, you're crunching the numbers day in and day out. How much has United been advantaged in this past 3-week episode?
Well, we certainly, this was not something we regret, and it didn't help us financially, but it is going to help us, by the way, be better in the future, because we're going to learn and be a better airline.
Well, this is, and I regret that I've spent so much time on my previous rant. I think about the burdens we place on you. My flight attendants today say, Rob, we're not even going to pay that close of attention to whether or not your bag is tucked up under the seat, to whether or not your cell phone's been turned off, because folks are so angry and passengers are pretty tough. We put these responsibilities on you. Every flight I get on says federal regulation requires you to follow the flight attendant's instructions. Your flight attendants had instructions. Folks don't follow those instructions. What is it? What would the enforcement mechanism be if the federal government was not regulating in this place? If it was not true that federal regulations require you to follow flight attendant instructions, what tool would you use to have a rowdy group of passengers follow your flight attendant instructions, which we need to do in the name of safety?
We appreciate the role that the FAA plays in ensuring that policies are in place to make our aircraft and our customers safe.
I don't believe that there's anyone in this town that cares more about your customers than you do. I don't believe the lesson of United's experience is that customers don't matter. I think the lesson is that customers do matter, and folks are going to change extraordinary policies in order to serve their customer base. We have never been safer. It has never been easier to get on an airplane. I would tell you, Mr. Chairman, the challenges that we face may not come from the private sector. They may come from right here on this committee and right down the road on Independence Avenue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I been listening for the last several hours, and let me just associate myself with the comments made by my colleagues on this side of the aisle, so I won't be repetitious and browbeat the issue. We're clear where we are in this regard. And also, let me state for the record that, I oppose the privatization of the air traffic controllers. With that, I've been flying for a while. I'm a little older than I look. Well, that's what I'm told. I remember People's Express, who then became Continental, who then became United, and they're hubbing in my district, Newark Airport, for quite some time. And so I've seen the evolution and the consolidation. And in some ways it's positive, and other ways it's been negative. But to me it appears that Southwest is really setting the standard here in the industry, and I would hope that some of the practices of that airline would be incorporated across the industry. But with that said, you know, I've had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Munoz on several occasions, as United is really giving back to the community where it's hubbed there in Newark, New Jersey. Each year, students in my district are interns from Newark and East Orange and Jersey City. And it's an opportunity to expose the young people to the careers in aviation at that airport. These communities are tremendously appreciative of these opportunities. So I just wanted to put that on the record for my district. But Mr. Munoz, the incident, you know, obviously with Flight 3411 really has kind of blemished United's reputation, but I'm glad to see, you know, your company has responded in the changes that it's made to create a more positive experience for your customers. You know, unfortunately, a lot of times my colleagues on the other side have talked about regulation, but there unfortunately, sometimes in the industry, a lot of things are reactive as instead of being proactive. But I'm sure if it wasn't clear before, this episode has highlighted some issues that the industry needs to come to grips with. And so how can Congress, the Department of Transportation, and the airlines work together to improve the flying experience for customers? Because in the end, that's what we want. We don't need to sit here and, you know, rehash. We understand, we know, everyone knows what happened. How can we all work together to make the experience more positive for customers? Because that's what we want to do as members of Congress as well. Help you and help the industry as well make this a positive experience.
Sir, thank you for your comments. And we love our intern program at EWR and have actually expanded that to other places in the country. I think I'm new to this industry. I've worked in many other industries, and I've had many a debate and a discussion on all these matters. And I think at the end of the day, an open discussion and a more proactive conversation rather than reactive is always helpful to us in business. The problem with introduced legislation or regulation at any point in time is that it is so reactive and it doesn't really apply to the business needs. And if there's some way we can do a more open debate and conversation between aisles, between the different companies, I think it's important. It's the old, how can we all get along aspect of that, and I think it's an important one to note. Just as we govern the country, as you govern us, I think it's important. But the end all, it has to be the customer at the center of the universe for us. And I think what you've heard from this panel is just that focus.
Well, thank you. And Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Comstock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I guess we've gotten to that point in the hearing where all the questions have been asked, but not everyone has asked them. And also, you know, many of the questions that we've already heard from, I would associate myself with, and, you know, genuine concern. And really, you know, it was appalling for everyone to see this, as I think has been expressed. And I do appreciate, Mr. Munoz, your recognizing that and your very strong statement on the initial, you know, I mean, the whole incident, the responses, and the detailed plans that you've come here to outline for us. And I hope we will continue that dialogue. And as I heard Mr. Davis earlier talk about the survey that he took, I hope you will kind of take into mind, you know, focus groups, surveys, reach out more to the flying public to hear from them. And in that regard, this is a little different than some of the questions we've had before. I wanted to point out something that we've highlighted in a working group that we have on women in the workforce, and that studies show, I know it's a little off what we've been talking about, but studies show that companies with 3 or more women in senior management functions scored higher in key factors of leadership, accountability, and innovation, and more than companies with no women that are at the top. And I know, when I look in the transportation industry in general and in aviation, it is very male-heavy, and the boards also are that case. So I would ask, as you're looking at this and making improvements and taking into account all of the things that we've discussed here today, sort of the diversification of boards and taking that opportunity. I think technology is something we can use much more, but also technology that really takes into account the lives of your flying public. I recently, I go online, I do a lot of my things online. I was recently flying, and I wasn't alerted, as I normally would be, that the flight was canceled. And when we got there, quite a few of us, it wasn't United, so I want to say who, but quite a few of us were not informed of this cancellation that had been canceled fairly, several hours that could have changed flights. So I hope you'll have board members who really sort of understand the on-demand economy, understand the diversity of the flying public and the needs, and use technology and that communication to improve, letting people know. Because in the case that I was in, if I had known beforehand, I might have been able to be that one, okay, no, I'll stay here a little longer, adjust, let me know. And then also getting people, when you're there in line and you're in that frustrating situation, all of us have our devices. It's a lot easier to do that than be standing in line. And oftentimes, you just need to have a person there saying, go here, do this. So really having that consumer service mentality that we've talked about today. So I just wanted to maybe, all of you could maybe highlight some of the ways that you are using technology and efforts that you are making to diversify your management, diversify the boards, and having who's working in our airlines more reflective of the flying public.
I'll start. With regards to women in the workforce, I have 5 sisters and 2 daughters, and so I can tell you that my focus is keen in that regard. In our organization at United, we probably have one of the most diverse management teams, certainly in the industry, if not the country. Our chief technology officer actually happens to be a woman, our chief customer officer, my chief of staff. And so we are very cognizant of that. We have 2 women board members. Our board in total needs some work, but again.
And how many? 2 out of?
15.
Okay.
We had a proxy situation, so we have an oversized board. With regards to the technology application, that's one of the most exciting things, and we don't have enough time to really walk you through it. But this, I mentioned it, in the moment application. We've rolled out 60,000, 70,000 iPhones with applications that actually assist our employees, assist our customers. Information, data about who's flying, where they're flying, connections. But now we're going to have an additional application or a capability that allows our frontline folks to solve issues right on the spot. So it's a whole broad aspect. I could talk about big data and personalization and some of the things that we're doing in the future, but I'll yield some time to somebody else that may want to answer.
Congresswoman, I might just comment on the Alaska Air Group Board of Directors. It's 40% female and has other elements of diversity represented on the board as well, and we believe it's one of the most diverse boards of any Fortune 500 company in America. That sort of sets the tone for us. I would tell you that our senior officer group at Alaska does not have quite that same good percentage, but we're working towards that because we do recognize the benefits that you spoke to of having that diversity throughout, not just the leadership of the company, but throughout the entire company. I would also say on the technology front, I mentioned it in my prepared testimony, but we have outfitted our entire customer-facing employee group, both flight attendants as well as airport customer service agents, with mobile devices, so they have readily available information on all of our customers, and importantly, our empowerment toolkit is available to those airport customer service agents in the moment on that device so that they can address problems quickly.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, we all have a long ways to go.
We'll have to do that very quickly for the next 2.
Absolutely. But I'm proud to say that at Southwest, if you just take a few examples, our CFO, our VP of in-flight, diversity, our controller, our VP internal audit, our VP communications, VP revenue management, VP technology, and I could keep going. We're all female, and so we've got a very targeted activity there, and not just to increase diversity, but because they are the right people for the right positions.
Diversity and inclusion is a core value at American, and we have a number of females on our senior leadership team, myself included, and I'm proud to represent American today. Also have been focused on building diversity within our leadership team and our board. And to your point about technology, I wish we had more time to talk about it. We have a lot of exciting changes coming. As I mentioned before, service recovery is one of our most important customer service initiatives, and that really includes being better able to communicate timely and accurate information to customers, particularly during disruptions, and giving both our employees. We have a number of new pieces of technology coming out this summer, and I'd be glad to tell you more about them later.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would appreciate having some more along those lines, the discussion on the technology.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Lawrence.
Thank you so much. To everyone that's here today, thank you for coming. There is, I feel, a very direct need to address the term overbooking. It implies lack of efficiency. You have X amount of seats, and then you have X amount of customers. We keep using a term that is automatically perceived as being inefficient. And I think we need to look at that from a marketing. You all are in customer service. I don't want to be overbooked anywhere. When you take my reservation, I expect for you to honor that. That's just a whole marketing piece that I think this industry needs to look at. You need to relabel it or call it something else. I want to know from the panel that's here, because I have found every time there is a correction, let's give an example. We validate the enormous amount of fees on luggage because of fuel costs. And now we're saying, now I heard today that we're able to give lower passenger fees because we charge more for luggage. Are we going to now see an increase justified by the fact that now if I take you out of a flight, I will give you up to $10,000? So can I expect a justification for an increase in travel based on these new policy that you all are taunting? Because to give me $10,000 for kicking me off a flight is a lot of money, because I don't know too many tickets that cost $10,000. So am I now going to hear from my customers that the prices of our plane tickets have gone up as a result of this enormous response to something that was totally inappropriate? And then the last thing I want to put, and then you can answer. I am always so frustrated by the frustrated staff when there are delays. When, you know, I've had the counter clerk be so hostile to the point where she says, "Don't ask me any more questions. I'm telling you everything I know." And she or he are overwhelmed. And I had an example, and it was none of you that's here, where the flight attendant stopped the line of boarding because he wanted to take the orders of the first class for their drink orders and said, "Would you please wait here and stretch for a minute? I need to take care of them," and backed up the loading. But we need to understand, and some of you seemed a little frustrated by the questions. We are customers, myself, all of us, and customer service is something that I don't know why Southwest is so darn happy every time you're on their flight. I don't know what they give them, happy pills or what, but they're just like, happy, come on in, we're so excited. And then some of them are so uptight, and I see these flight attendants running to get on a flight because they're holding the flight for them to get there. So please, in a few minutes that's left, those are the concerns I have, and I would like some answers.
We as leaders of airlines, we own the morale and the mood of our teams, and we know that, and we accept that responsibility. And it is our responsibility to take care of our teams, make sure they know we care about them, that we've provided the right tools, the right resources, the right support to deliver.
But do you recognize you need to improve in that area?
Absolutely, we recognize that we need to improve, which is why that we're here today. I apologize if we've seemed frustrated with questions, because it's really my honor to come and reiterate Americans' commitment to serving our customers.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. Can someone address will there be an increase as a result of this new policy?
No, ma'am. And in fact, we think that by the new, not just this policy, but the new policies we've put in place, which really does allow our employees to have the tools to use their common sense to solve customer problems by leading to better customer service, will actually help us and will lead to a more profitable airline. We don't view this as a cost or something that's going to cause us to drive ticket prices up.
Mr. McGee.
Yes, thank you, Congressman. There's been a lot of talk about cost today and price, but I think when we dig down into the weeds on these issues, we find that there's not always a correlation between an airline's costs and the fares that they charge. Just last week, The Economist noted that jet fuel prices had fallen by half since 2014. The profit per passenger for airlines in Europe is $7.84. The profit per passenger for airlines in North America is $22.40, 3 times more. And they stated, when costs fall, consumers in America fail to enjoy the benefits. So you've hit on a very key issue. We're told that if we don't check a bag, we're going to see a lower fare. Well, I didn't check a bag yesterday, and as I pointed out earlier, on my flight from Bradley Airport, there was a $250 differential in 7 hours. It's very hard to tell consumers that you know, they're going to see a lower fare when they do certain things, and then they don't.
Thank you all. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sanford is next.
I tell my boys all the time that life is a series of course corrections. And what you don't get right in one day, you may get right the next. And to err is human. And I guess with that in mind, you know, what happened on the United flight was a disaster, just cutting to the chase, and there's no getting around it. And some of what my colleague, Ms. Lawrence from Michigan, just mentioned in terms of the way in which passengers handled at times is equally disastrous. But I would go back, it was actually Churchill who said, never let a good crisis go to waste. Rahm Emanuel actually changed just one word in that phrase. He said, never let a serious crisis go to waste. But in essence, he was paraphrasing Churchill. And what he was getting at is government has a tendency in the wake of any disaster to react, at times to overreact, at times to overregulate, and at times to fight yesterday's battle. And so what may be supposedly a remedy, it turns out yet to produce another consequence that people didn't see coming in terms of higher bag pricing or whatever else. And so I guess my question to each one of you all is to follow up on what my colleague from Georgia was getting at, which is, you know, in some cases, government creates some of these problems, given the conduit that you've got to work through on a daily basis. If you were to pick 3 regulations that cause you either to not give some of the service that the customer would expect or to price things a bit differently, what would be the 3 regulations that you would choose to erase?
I'm going to let Scott, who's been in this industry quite a while and across other airlines, he probably has a good view on that. I have my own.
I'm not sure I'd call they aren't necessarily regulations. High on our list would be for our partners at the TSA and the Customs and Borders Patrol to have more ability to plan in the future and respond. You know, some of our hard customer experiences are long TSA lines. It's been mentioned by a number of members today, and Customs and Border Patrol, where we will have situations where we have hours-long backups at Customs. And our
okay, but that's a government action. I mean, you punted on my colleague's question. I want to bore back down. Are there a couple things that government you think ought to do different from a regulatory standpoint that would help you to serve customers better?
Well, you know, high on our list would be FAA privatization, because we believe it would really, that's one of the biggest things that we could do to ultimately serve customers better, because we create more efficiency.
But that's a big, broad umbrella. I want to get down in the weeds. Are there 3 specific, small things that are pint-sized, measurable, specific, and achievable in nature that would help you to better serve the customer?
I think one would be just our the full fare advertising regulation, just the ability to make it very transparent, because it includes just the taxes today, but just put us all on a level playing field.
Okay, that's one.
That would be one that I had on my list as well. We don't have the ability to
Okay,
show
I got
customers,
that. That's
right?
one.
And then also just regulation around GDS, the Global Distribution Systems, and how we display and sell our products. Relaxation there would be helpful.
Okay, we're at 2.
Sir, I would add in, we talked about the carriage and the charter and the thick documents. I think that Chairman Schuster is correct. A lot of that verbiage is driven by things that have happened in these rooms. And as we move to a more streamlined approach, it'd be helpful to be able to work back and forth on how we can reduce some of that density.
You're general. Could you be more specific?
Y'all place a lot of stuff on us.
Like what? I'm trying to get to 3.
Well, gosh, I haven't been in the business long enough to understand, but I know it from other.
Would your president know one then?
Well, I agree with the consumer-facing rules are the ones that are most frustrating for us because we feel like we're not adequately. There's a number of rules within advertising where we would like to actually more clearly communicate to customers, and we would like our partners who sell tickets, people like Expedia, to clearly communicate to customers. And there's a host of specific rules in there that wind up. I don't know the specific exact rules now, but we just have a whole set. They're what my 2 colleagues, similar to what my 2 colleagues referred to, of rules where we have a bunch of requirements to communicate to consumers, and we wind up confusing the issue. We would much prefer clear communication.
Mr. McGee, would you see that from a different vantage point? Again, I'm trying to get really specific and maybe. I just I saw a note passed to Mr. Jordan. Did you have a good one he just handed you? And then I'm coming to you, Mr. McGee. And my staff does that to me, so I get it.
Well, this is an old one here. This revenue diversion. So taxes and fees should stay within the aviation system.
Got it.
I think is a basic.
Yeah. Yes, sir, Mr. McGee. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Congressman. We've just heard from several airlines that they're looking for less regulation on fares and fees and how that is translated to consumers. From our perspective, yes, we have an absolutely different perspective. The airlines are the ones that are imposing these ancillary fees. They say they are optional, but as has been pointed out here today, for many people, not taking a suitcase is not an option. It's necessary. And yet, the transparency on getting a full and complete fare, inclusive of mandatory taxes and fees that we all have to pay, and ancillary fees that the airlines impose at their will, that has become more cumbersome and more difficult from a consumer perspective, both on airlines' own branded websites and on third-party sites, than it's been.
Thank you, and I see I've gone over my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm required to call a 5-minute recess at this point. 5 minutes.
Look at the Irish.
Yeah, well, that was just we know.